was so many things that she's like, I literally like can't move. I can't think. It's just too many. It's too much.
Sure.
And and then it's funny because now that we change venues, she's pretty relaxed. She's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And now I'm this like shaking, pooping
You've
animal.
traded places.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm not used to that at all. Usually I'm the one I'm the one who annoys her by saying everything's gonna be okay. And she's like, stop
Listen,
saying
buddy,
that.
it will be okay.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, I will drive out to Catskills 2 days early and I will cater the fucking thing if I have to. Okay.
Shut up.
It will be fine. 75 people. Last 4th of July, I had 120 at my house. I can do it. It's fine.
That is, first of all, that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's not going to come to that. It's not going to come to that. And though I appreciate it, I could not in good I feel like I'd be taking serious advantage of you.
Listen,
Um,
buddy, I'm just saying it's going to be okay one way or the other. We're going to get through this. It's going to be fine. The poops will stop. All will be well. You'll be happily constipated again any moment
yeah,
now. It's all
yeah.
going to come together.
That's really what I want. I want to get back to a place where I go, why didn't I poop today?
Picture this, okay? It's sunny. You're in Italy. It's a beautiful day. You're standing there with the love of your life, looking at the beautiful Sistine Chapel ceiling,
Hmm.
and suddenly it occurs to you as you look up and see the face of God staring back at you that you haven't pooped in 18 hours. And you say, "My God, this truly is His chosen seat on earth." My goodness, it's
Like,
gonna happen.
yeah, I'd be like, oh my God, my butthole is not inflamed. Finally.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. You're gonna have a great time. It's gonna be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really, I could kiss you right now. I needed to talk to somebody to calm me down.
Dude, I
Uh,
completely get it. I totally, completely get it. It's these things are stressful. I've worked on quite a few of them.
I definitely had a moment where I was taking a shower and I started laughing, thinking about like the tagline for the movie that is this wedding prep, and
Mm,
it's like I always thought weddings were romantic, but it turns out they're Lovecraftian horror.
it's true.
I'm just staring into the abyss, like like it's never
You've
ending.
seen too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
you never truly come back from planning one of these. You've changed, fundamentally.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Man, how are you? I'm sorry. How are you? How is everybody? How are you, chat? Hey, Edgar.
These are good. I did you play Shadow of the Erd Tree? I can't remember.
Yes, I did. I finished it and I loved it.
I dove into it for the first time yesterday, and
Let's
boy,
hear it.
that is a beautiful world to explore.
I want to hear all of your thoughts in crystalline detail, please.
Well, I haven't completed it, but I dove in, I played for a few hours. That world of like perpetual sunset, that like weird dusk vibe it has with all the deep reds and almost like purples, and like the shadows feel almost like misty, like foggy, like there's a substance to the darkness of it.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's such a cool way to do that like mirror world thing they're going for, where it's like, the cheap obvious thing would be like, oh, it's everything's darkness and it's nighttime, and ooh, it's the opposite of light, and it's okay. But instead they went for that almost like Twilight princessy vibe, where it's like the sun, it's like a very cloudy day and the sun is in the process of setting, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's all golden and red and kind of hard to, it feels very almost like incandescent. It's very glowy and bloomy, and it's great.
Yeah.
Super good art direction.
The way they captured the beautiful melancholy of it is just I
Yeah.
don't think anybody does that like them. I think people try to be them. People try. They try to do what FromSoft does, but they don't got the juice.
Yeah.
And I was thinking a lot about it when I was playing it and I was like, how are they getting this effect? How are they making me feel this? And I was similar to you. I'm sure you were looking at every corner of it and being like, what
Oh
is,
yeah.
and I noticed some certain things. Um,
Mhm.
Namely that, so it reminded me of something when I was talking to Steven Zapata,
Mhm.
who's going to be on again because I asked him to come back on to talk more about. We were talking about color when he was on the big draw,
Mhm.
and he said something that I loved it because it was so instantly true. He
Mhm.
said, I mean, he was quoting. oh my god, that book that we were talking about, Paradise Lost, where they talk about,
Oh, sure.
he talks about the writer has that forward where he says he doesn't rhyme because rhyming is like this like hedonistic nonsense that you don't need to do to write good poetry. Um,
Okay.
and he's relating, and Steven's relating that to color because he works mostly in black and white. And so
Hmm.
he's like, yeah, you don't need to do color. He's like, color should is not something that's obligatory. It's emotional. Like the purpose of color in an illustration
Hmm.
is to communicate something emotional, not to depict reality perfectly. Essentially, was his point.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that. That sounds much better than uncolorblind. I'm gonna use that from now on. That's a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah, but it's true. I think that's why I like it so much is because it's like, oh, that's like a truth that I believe that I've always agreed with but didn't know it because it's like,
Yeah.
if anyone looks at my comics, my colors are not rational. Like the sky is green, it's like all this stuff because I'm
Yeah.
trying to
I
get a feeling.
do.
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think I get what you're saying. I do love that From Software is one of the few companies in their art direction that can kind of embrace nonsensical things.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense for the field of wheat to be blood red as the sun is setting, but it's gonna be, and it's gonna leave a stark impression.
yeah, yeah. There's a kind of I agree completely. There's a kind of like what was it? Yeah, the melancholy. I think a lot of it captures because when things are darker, the saturation is lower in the real
Mhm.
world. But what they do in Shadow of the Erd Tree, if you look, the shadows are like they give it like a magenta hue.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and they're kind of like there's like shadow people, and they're like fuzzy.
yeah,
They have like a blurriness to them where it's like it feels like they're kind of like in another world that's maybe overlapping with this one or something. Like they're not quite on the same like plane.
yeah, that's a really good
And
way to put
it's
it.
it's so cool looking. It's like, it you can feel it the way it looks. It's got such a like you look at it and you're like, I know how that would feel.
Yeah, how it would feel to touch them.
Yeah, it would feel like I don't know. I have this memory of I was in a cave, I think in Missouri or something when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and there was like the albino fish in like a pool. And you're not supposed to do this, but I was like 5 years old, and I remember reaching into it, and the water felt thicker than normal water and a little slick, almost like slimy. It was like denser and cold, and it feels like if you reached into these characters, it would be like that kind of vibe where it's like there's a denseness and like a weird filmy quality to it,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, it's because they're always. It's interesting. It's like the only video game company developers that I know of that actually have a huge aesthetic focus on what is essentially surrealism.
yeah,
It's like surrealist dark. It's not just dark fantasy because it's not like Game of Thrones.
mm,
It's like surrealist dark fantasy where you're meant to feel like you're moving through. It's like the reality of the game kind of just washes over you. It's just kind of like you're. It's like
yeah.
weirdly soothing. Like I play Elden Ring almost daily, mostly because it's relaxing now. It's like I just which is
Hmm.
really unusual. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the shadows, they're not grayish. They're actually like magentas and blues and reds, um, and those are the darker tones, and then the lighter tones are actually paler. So everything is kind of inverted. It's like,
Yeah.
which is what they're going for, which is like it's like this inverted reality. Um,
It's so cool.
it's
And I
cool.
obviously I fucked something up because I got a my favorite thing in those games is when you get an ominous message that you've never seen before and you're like, what did I do? And it's like too late because you can't undo it ever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I still don't I think I know what it did, but I don't know for sure. And I'm excited. I got a message that said somewhere a great rune has broken and a charm has been lifted. And I'm like, okay, does this mean all my friends hate me now? Is essentially because everybody up to that point was like, we should all be fighting a war because we're all from different armies, but the charm of kindly Mikola has brought us here, and they kept saying charm. And I'm like, uh-oh, like are all my friends bad guys now? But I haven't found out yet.
I actually don't remember if that's the catalyst because you're gonna fight everybody because every FromSoft game does that.
Yes, of course.
But I don't remember if that's the catalyst or if something else. But yeah, it's I remember finally figuring out what that was and being like, oh, what? Like I was just, yeah, it's
I was walking towards a big spooky tower, and then suddenly I heard glass shattering, and then I got an ominous message, and I went, "What did I do?" Because I didn't interact with anything. I was just walking, and I was
you
like, "Oh."
you check under your shoes.
Yeah, I was like, oh boy. Did I
Yeah.
just break the game? Because like they love to do that. They love to accidentally make you destroy your save file, and then you just got to replay the game.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is they're kind of trolls, but they're really
They
good at
do,
it.
yeah. They're good at it. There's usually a way to maybe undo it, but you have to try really hard. There's usually like a convoluted thing. But sometimes if you screw up, like I remember original Dark Souls, it's like Solaire, once Solaire is gone, he's gone. He's a bug guy, and that's it. That's it. He's just gone. You can't get him back. You fucked up. He's
Hmm.
gone. And it's like, oh man. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm really enjoying it. The art direction's been fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Even the weird things like is I'm sure there's got to be some kind of in-world explanation for why the gravestones have that ghost filter and they're transparent, but I don't almost don't want to know. It's just such a cool visual.
Yeah, the interpretation of it is more interesting. It's like,
Yeah, like a graveyard where the graves themselves are the ghosts is like I don't know. It's like it sort of reminds me. It's not as over the top, but there's that great scene at the end of Return of the King where they're in the Dunharrow, I think it is, with all the ghosts,
hmm,
and when the Ghost King steps back and all the other ghosts start to materialize. In the background, their city that used to be there also materializes, and it also looks like a ghost. It's like
yeah.
transparent like citadels and things that are just like rubble now, and like I always thought that was such a cool choice to like have a ghost city be a city that's a ghost and not just a regular city.
Hmm. Yeah,
But it
yeah.
feels like that.
Because it makes sense if you're going to do that in a place where everything is ruins, because then it's like the idea being that it doesn't matter if they leave it all behind, they are still like
Mm,
they're not, oh sorry, I hit the camera again. They're not out of that place like ever. Like it's so like even if the place crumbles, the ghost of that location, they're still doomed to wander those halls.
yeah, it's so cool. And like I don't know if it's
Yeah.
supposed to be, I don't know if like the lands of shadow are supposed to be like an afterlife or an in between, or I don't know why there's graves everywhere. It's just such a cool visual.
The,
Just a
what,
really
when I
visual.
saw the transparent gravestones, my immediate interpretation, like what I thought almost right away, was like, oh, it means that some people who have died kind of exist half in this place and half in the lands between,
Mm,
almost like a purgatory or. Um,
right.
but yeah, it's beautiful. I love the music when you first arrive
That's great.
on the Dark Plains, and it's this like somber, beautiful, but it's like got that kind of stirring to it. Like it's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I love the tree is like falling apart in a way that doesn't make sense for a tree to fall apart, and it's only happening in certain areas.
Hmm.
It's almost like if anyone hasn't seen this, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It's like this big gnarled dead tree, and sections of it look like they're dissolving and falling to the ground the way like a sandcastle would if you poured water on it. It's like dissolving a little bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a tree falling apart. It looks like dust or something like blowing down. It's very very interesting. Yeah, I have no idea what's going on with any of that stuff. I haven't gotten that far into the lore of it, but
Well, it almost looks more like time is more of an issue than force,
yeah,
which is a really cool idea.
very very interesting. I'm wondering if we're gonna meet Nicola because everyone's like he's walking around.
Yeah.
He's here. He's trying to figure out how to be a god. I'm like, okay, like man, the character designs are like I didn't think they were gonna, Elden Ring was already so strong. It's crazy that they found even more unique stuff like Freyja and like the other man, the Needle Knight lady and the guy who's just covered in like knots of rope is like it's such so many cool visuals.
Yeah. Oh, the one I forgot his name, but he looks like kind of looks like Darkman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he has that great like it's like I think he has an Irish accent. which
Yes.
I just loved. First of all, I love the Irish accent. I think it's beautiful. But his delivery of it is especially just great. It's like I don't know how Miyazaki. I'm curious what kind of direction he always gives his voice actors
Mm,
because he always seems to capture something really interesting. Like he always seems to really know how to make use of like the what do you call it the timbre of their voice in a way that's just
mhm.
really like gripping where you're like what is this like you just want to hear them talk more. um
There's no forgettable voice actors in those games. They're all kind of haunting in a weird way.
yeah, and they do it without doing like the voice actor thing,
Right.
without doing like oh shucks,
Yeah.
what a character. It's always understated. People are never it's like he almost like he directs people to be very understated and kind of silent because when he wants them to yell, it's going to be much stronger as an effect.
Yes.
Um,
Some of the best uses of compression and reverb in any video game ever. Like when they want you to feel like someone's in a big helmet, you're gonna feel like they're in a big helmet.
yeah,
It's like, oh, this is
absolutely.
great. Like it's so cool. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I could talk about this all day. I want to get into more of it. So, which bosses have you faced so far?
Okay, I faced a couple NPC invaders like fire knights and some carrion knights and
Okay.
in terms of bosses, Rolana, who I think is supposed to be Renala's twin.
Yeah,
It's like this big knight with a
the two
sword and
swords.
a cape who has the same name, but the consonants are flipped, so it's Rolana. But I haven't looked into who that is yet. But it says like cursed twin. There's
Yeah.
the dancing lion, who was such a cool design. I was like, oh, this is great. It's like a barong Bali thing, but also like a Chinese New Year dragon dancing down the street kind of thing. But also, it was really really cool. That boss was crazy. There's a giant hippopotamus with like golden Sonic the Hedgehog quills. I was like, what
Yeah.
the fuck is this? He's rolling around like Sonic 3.
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? Like,
That particular boss for me, I started laughing because I was like, they kind of like created like that boss feels like a combination of a Resident Evil boss and a Pokemon.
yes, very good. It feels like an RJ Palmer interpretation of a Pokemon. It's like, here's the realistic version of Hippotrix or whatever the
Yeah.
fuck they call it. But yeah,
Look out for those spikes, Leon.
yeah,
Yeah.
Leon. Yeah, the giant Wicker Man things are cool. I have not been able to defeat one, but they're really fucking cool. I didn't realize that the like prongs on the top of the basket were like desiccated arms with hands. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah. I beat the entire DLC without ever really defeating one of those guys.
And then oh god, the game got me so good because I was walking around in this big lake and I saw this big there's like, dead trees that had fallen over everywhere, and I was like, this is cool. Then there was an extra big pile of dead trees, and I was like, there's gonna be a monster under there. I was like 100% there's gonna be a monster under that pile of trees. And then I got really close to it and I was like, any minute now it's gonna pop up. There's something under here. And then nothing happened, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when I turned around to leave, the pile of trees itself came to life, and it wasn't trees, it was a Dracolich. It's like a giant undead fucking dragon that looked like dead trees that was like curled up in a
Oh,
ball. And I was like,
yeah.
no. It's just I was like, you got me. You found a way to get me.
The patience that it requires to set that up
Mm,
and to not telegraph it. You know what I mean? Because it's like
yeah.
you're a developer working on a game for that long, and you're like, okay, but if we don't let them know, they could miss it. And it's like, well, then they might miss it, and that's it. And I'd
Yes.
rather they discover it than tell them and have it not be as impactful. You know, because it's like, yeah, you could play the whole game and not run into that. And
Yeah.
what a bummer it would be, but also like how much fun it would be to play the game for the third time and suddenly come across that thing and be like, how did I miss this? Um,
Also, the way they designed it is like it could have like if you don't get too close to it, it just looks like more of the dead trees. But then when it opens up and it unfolds, it's clearly what it is. It's not like so I don't know. That's such a good natural camouflage to pull off and not have it be too obvious.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
But what other bosses? Let me think. What other bosses? There has to be more. There must be more.
Did you
Hmm.
fight any of the mausoleum bosses, like the and the
I
crypt?
fought there was a Death Knight who had like almost like dragonfly wings made out of like ghost fabric.
Oh, cool. Okay.
That guy was really cool. There was another one who was like a gladiator type dude. He was like a sentinel knight thing. There was another one.
Was he the one with the armor of solitude?
Yes,
Okay.
I fought that guy. That guy looked sick.
I love that armor. I think you get it after you beat him.
You do, yes.
Um,
I've noticed that's the other thing they're doing a lot with this one that I kind of enjoy is it's not really about experience or leveling up, it's about finding cool stuff. Like
yeah.
you get those things to sort of level up just in general, but it's not like collect souls, build your character out. It's like you're just going to find a lot of really cool things. And like if you want to use them, cool, but if you don't, whatever, you're going to enjoy the process of finding them. But it seems way more about the discovery than what you do with the things you discover, which I kind of like. It's a cool switch for them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I was so happy because a lot of the weapons you get are already like level 10,
Yeah,
which I was like, that's a really good move because like you don't want
yeah,
people doing grinding instead of just enjoying the DLC. Like you want that buzz. You want people talking about the DLC in real
hmm,
time, and you can't get that if everybody's like, "Oh, I got to level up this sword so I can
yeah.
you're not just scumming for smithing stones and all that stuff. Instead, you're just like, oh, cool, this is already like, and a lot of the weapons are long range and short range, like which I've been loving,
Yeah.
where you can like throw the weapon. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's just great.
It felt like a lot it feels a lot like a Zelda game in a weird way where like I
Interesting.
went out into the middle of the field and I looked around and I was like, okay, from the starting area I can see like three castles, four churches, like a cursed mountain range, a dead village, a giant gnarly tree, a chasm, a lake. I'm like, there's like so much
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
that you immediately it's like, okay, it felt very Breath of the Wildy, where it's like, oh man, like Elden Ring, the base game, when you jump in, the world's huge, but when you step out into Limgrave, it's like, okay, it's Limgrave. Like there's some churches and there's a big castle in the distance, but everything kind of looks like it belongs in that place.
hmm
When you step out into the gravestone field, it's like, oh, there's like my dog is what's going on, pup? Got something stuck. Anyway, there's like seven biomes, like
yeah,
immediately, like
wow,
tons of ruins, and all the ruins are different types of architecture. There's like a weird
yeah.
Greek Parthenon thing on a
Oh,
hill,
dude, yeah,
and there's a cathedral, and there's like a very Dark Ages castle, and there's like Sauron Tower, and you're like, it's all there, and you're like, what the fuck? There's
yeah.
so much cool stuff.
I absolutely loved when you roll out and when the weird Wicker Man giant thing. When you
Yeah,
first see it from a distance, it just looks like a flaming tower. Then you get closer and closer, and you're like, "Oh, that's a dude!" Like,
it's walking around.
yeah. Malka was next to me on the couch, just hanging out when I was doing that part. She's like, "What's that in the distance?" I was like, "Oh, do you want to see what that is? You want me to show you this shit?" And then
Yeah,
as I get closer and you start to see it move, she had never really like analyzed Elden Ring. She saw that she was like, "That's crazy," because she was like looking at it, and up close you see all the tortured souls that comprise its body, and
yeah.
it's like that is epic.
And I think as a first, maybe they have destructible environments that those things can destroy.
Yeah,
Like if you're in like a campsite with like a bunch of knights, that thing can just level everything, including the environment, and just like burn it all down, which I don't think they've really done before.
they've done it with some of the dragons in the base game.
Mm,
Because I'm replaying the base game now because I apparently never stopped playing this game. But like,
it's a great game.
I just left Ronnie's Rise, and there's that crystal dragon outside. I
Yes, yes.
love that. And you know how he always leaves before you can kill him. He,
I never killed him, and then when Blythe
yeah,
goes back there, I had to fight the two of them at the same time, and it was hilarious because it was just like an impossible scenario. But yeah,
that is a nightmare.
he
Did
kept
you survive it?
triggering it. I eventually cheesed it so I could get rid of him and then the dragon, but
Yeah.
like it was so funny because they would just trigger each other, and it was like absolutely impossible.
Oh,
But yeah, it was
like they
great.
would they attack each other ever or no?
I'd like attack Blythe, and then he'd run around, and him running around would make the dragon come over, and it was just like, no, like no, stop it.
That's
But
annoying.
yeah,
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, it was like yeah. So when I faced that dragon this time around, when he left, it's so cool. He flies up, but as he did because of where we were on the map, he
Mm.
just takes a huge chunk out of the castle. He just he just his tail
Oh,
just
that's awesome.
absolutely rips the side of this castle like the brick off, and it just and literally the falling bricks, right? You could feel the vibration with the
I
controller.
don't think I even saw that.
Yeah, it's
Whoa,
it happens a few times in the game where you're fighting a dragon and he'll just like knock over trees and or ruins, or it's pretty great.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it really gives you. I mean, the word epic, it gets thrown around a lot, but like
True.
if you're gonna fight a dragon, like like having it
Yeah.
knock over buildings and stuff is like is
I mean, I've never seen a game sell a sense of scale the way that that game does. Like there's a Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are like the world is big, but there's not a lot of big stuff in it.
hmm
There's like, some dragons you can walk around on in the sky. There's a couple, big-ish enemies. But Elden Ring, there's like I've never seen a game go for scale the way that that game goes for scale, where it's like, oh, that building just stood up. Like, okay, like,
yeah.
whoops. Like, okay,
it
uh-oh.
yeah it's man I love it so much like it's so, especially like as I'm working on the King Arthur comic, it's like
Mm.
nothing gets me more jazzed to do this type of art than like playing
Yeah,
Elden Ring.
clearly, yeah. It's right in the wheelhouse for sure.
Yeah, it's so it's just like endlessly satisfying, and just like every time I don't get tired of it. I'm just like, um, yeah, I mean, and I keep rediscovering parts of it that I love and be like, oh, this is what they're doing. Like, I don't know how you can think this deeply about something for this long and then restrain yourself from telling everybody, look, this is what I did here. This is what I did here. This is
And
what.
I also found I found like a jail where they were putting people inside the jars.
Oh yeah,
That was so awesome and like gnarly and gross, and like you can like hear the people moaning inside the jar, and they're
yeah.
like all the like squishy stuff that comes out, and like man, it was great.
The oh, the like the what are they called? The people that they're like halfway out of the jars and they're like the
Yeah.
viscera, and then they puke viscera at you or something.
Yes. It was so gross and awesome.
And like legitimately scary. Like I jumped. I was like, oh god, like this is because when you first fight
Yeah.
them, when you're first leveling up using the whatever they're called, the particular level up things that they have in that part of the map, they're like overwhelming. Like they'll kill you.
Yeah.
It's not easy to just you can't just walk through them.
They do this thing, and I don't know why I haven't started looking out for it yet, but they keep finding ways to subvert it where I don't see it coming, where they'll introduce a new geometry in the level and nothing will happen. They'll just be like, oh, some of the jars are upside down now. Okay. And like nothing will happen. You just see some upside down jars, and you're like, all
Mhm.
right, I guess that's the thing now. And then suddenly one of them will stand up and charge at you, and you're like, oh, some of them have people under them. Oh no, okay.
Yeah,
Like they wait like a good 15 minutes after you see the first one to
yeah.
spring that on you.
There's a certain amount of psychological manipulation to be like, we have to make them comfortable first. Um,
Yes.
yeah, it's great. I can't, the dude. There's parts of it I can't. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's parts of it coming up where I legitimately think you're gonna like your eyes are gonna roll back in your head like that Vince McMahon meme. Um,
I'm
it's
excited.
there's just there's like there are particular enemies that you face that are where they build it up in a way that's very different than the base game, where it gets very cinematic, with like the little notes that
Cool.
are like, look out for this thing, and it actually parts of it legitimately where I was like, oh, they're like straight up pulling from the Bloodborne mood, um,
Mm,
yeah, no, I mean, it's the greatest video game ever made. I honestly think Elden
yeah.
Ring is I think I know I haven't played everything, so I really it's silly for me to say that because I'm not like a gamer who's played a lot of stuff. But
I'm in an area that feels like it's maybe a final-ish area, so I'm thinking about leaving and looking for more stuff, but I don't know. It feels it's Mesmer's Tower. It feels very like Mesmer's the big bad they've been advertising. Maybe I should not be here.
I don't know. You might be early. I ended up fighting Mesmer like 60% through the game, not even the full thing. So
Okay.
you might be early, but you know how the Elden Ring is, where they're like, yeah,
Yeah,
you can face him early, whatever.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess you can see how you feel when you fight him. If you're like, this is ridiculous, like I'm not gonna beat him, like then maybe
Yeah.
circle back. because there's a lot. I actually thought that I had seen everything, and then I was like, let me go in another time, and then like I ended up being 2 more weeks of discovering things. I just couldn't believe it, and it was like I was texting my friend Nick, who's like, who's the one who got me into this stuff. He's the one who got me to play Bloodborne for the first time, which like ended up like literally changing my career, by the way, because without that, I never would have done Black Marrow. Like Bloodborne made me want to do that, and
Mm.
then that like has like really helped my career. Like I was like really much more obscure before like before Bloodborne like seeped into my brain and like and I was texting him about it and I was like I cannot describe the like the sheer like junky high that I get every time I discover
Mhm.
like a cave or like a hidden area. And like every time I see an opening on the side of a mountain, I'm like, yeah, I like.
Bloodborne did the trick that you can never do a second time, and they pulled it off flawlessly, which is shocking. You're familiar with what I'm talking about, right?
I think so.
So, for anyone listening, if you haven't played Bloodborne, don't listen to this. Just go play it. But they did the trick that you can only do once, and it's when all the advertising for that game came out. None of it was about H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh yeah, yeah.
None of it. It was a Van Helsing game. It was a gothic horror game where you can be a werewolf hunter
Hmm.
and go fight vampires and werewolves. And there was no hint that it was going to be cosmic horror and it was going to be about going mad. None of that was in the advertising at all. And they kept that under wraps all the way to release. So then when you're playing the game and you're not looking for spoilers, suddenly all this weird stuff starts happening and you're like, is the game glitching? Like something's attacking me and it's not here. Like the enemy's not loading. Like what's going on? And like all these weird little bugs and things that you thought were wrong would start to happen. You're like, oh, what's happening? This doesn't make any sense. These characters are talking about things that it doesn't make any logical sense. And then they do a turn and you're like, oh, this is a game about going insane and it's a Lovecraft game, and they completely hid that in the marketing so that as you're playing it you feel like you're going a little crazy, which is just unbelievable that they were able, and not only able to do that, but that the Namco and everybody involved was willing to let them not advertise any of the Lovecraft stuff.
Yeah, because when they were doing that, I mean, the whole idea of like the player becoming the unreliable narrator,
Yeah,
it feels like that was were they the first ones to do that? I know that other horror games were experimenting, but did they do that after Bloodborne?
I don't think anyone stuck the landing as well as they, other people might have done it. I didn't play a
Yeah,
ton of horror games up to that point,
yeah,
but I don't think anyone really stuck the landing as well as they did because nobody knew that that game was going cosmic horror when it came out.
yeah.
And then
Super
it
weird.
goes full cosmic horror in such a satisfying way where all the gameplay systems and all the art design perfectly channel into this central theme in a way that is so satisfying and perfectly executed. And man, it's just crazy because they can never do it again. If they make a sequel to Bloodborne, that's they can't do that twist again.
Yeah, yeah, it's true, and it's one of those things where like, yeah, I mean, the way you put it's great. You can only do that once, really. You can only, I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're going to get new players for a
Yeah.
sequel. But it's like I feel like they're gonna. I mean, if they ever do a sequel, which I'm just hoping that it's gonna happen. I think it's likely that they'll have to at least reference those things. Like, I mean, which
Mhm.
I would love. But they never do too much like cheesy fan service stuff. They really don't do that.
No.
Um, but the idea that you're going insane and that you're earning the points to go insane, which is like my favorite thing. Like your
Yeah, you're
insight,
like, oh, yeah, I want my insight. The number goes up. It's a game. I love this. And then the number going up has huge negative effects. And you're like, oh, okay, all right.
but it
Whoops.
also it also like opens up opportunities and doors, which
Yeah, it's
is
great.
really interesting. Where you're like, oh, there's parts of the game you can only really access once you're this level of crazy.
And all the things of like, you think the game's broken and bugging out, and then you realize that you don't have enough insight into the madness to realize what's attacking you. And then once you do, you're like, oh, I wish I could unsee that. Like,
Yeah.
it's so great. It's just so good. But man, yeah, Elden Ring is just, I think this DLC is bigger than Bloodborne. I like, it feels like it's bigger than a whole game that they would have done in a previous generation.
Mm. Yeah.
I think it might be because it's like just in terms of size and number of things you fight, I think it might be bigger than Bloodborne.
What you mean the DLC alone?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. Especially when you get to the end of it, I think you'll probably be like, "Holy crap! I cannot believe this is a DLC."
it's
The
wild.
DLC. I mean, I played it for I think like 50 hours or more. Like
Yeah, that sounds about right.
it was just insane. Like I'm playing the base game again now, and I can't wait to get back to the DLC so I can experience it a second time. Because I played the base game like 5 times already. So I just like there's certain moments of it where I was like I just couldn't believe. There's one area, the area I was telling you about where they kind of reference Bloodborne,
Mm.
where I had I was like taking pictures of it. I was like I cannot believe how perfectly curated this environment is. It was like it looked like they were pulling directly from like the feeling and atmosphere you get from like old 70s sci-fi novel
Hell
covers,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
where it's like the green mist and
I haven't seen that yet.
oh dude, it literally looks like something from like the movie Legend. And I was just like, I love this more than I love like my favorite movies. Like this is like I could be here all day. And
Man,
yeah, it's incredible. Like giant oak trees with like where the roots are big enough for you to walk along. It's just so cool. I can't.
I'm pumped.
Yeah, it's great. It was every time I play one of their games, I'm like, this is like a completely unique aesthetic experience. Like I feel like
I
when
get angry because I'm like, I want a model viewer. I want a photo mode because like some of the I don't want to like I'll purposefully die. Like we talked about this. I'll purposefully die to the bosses just to farm screenshots.
of them killing you.
Yeah, well, just to see their designs because some of them move so fast, I can't appreciate how cool they are.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I want to see this fucking, dancing lion thing. I want to know what this thing is. And it's like, I probably fought that thing 20 times and died on purpose just to collect screenshots and look at it from all different angles.
yeah. Well, I fought it more times and I was not dying on purpose, so that should tell you where I'm at skill wise. Because I was trying my best, and I was like, this is quite difficult. He kind of reminded me of the I forgot the guy you fight in the that winter castle, who's like he has the with the prosthetic leg.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's
I
his
know what you're talking
the
about.
general? He's like a military name. He's like the general or something.
Yes.
But it's like all the AOE attacks that just go on forever. It's like wind and
Castle
lightning and
Soul
ice.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you say?
I think he's in like Castle Soul.
Soul. That's the one.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but I remember the castle.
And he has those two knights that are like
Yes, that was a hard fight.
okay, I have a theory about that fight. I'm pretty sure that boss is designed to force you to co-op
Yeah, probably.
because they're like, so we have to, people like need to see that this system exists.
Yes. And there's also a bunch of NPCs that are like, that general up there sure needs to die. I hope I can kill him someday, but not alone. And you're like, it seems like you want me to summon people.
Yeah, and they put the summon like right near the entrance where they're like, come
Hmm.
on, call a friend, let us show you
Man,
this system.
I wonder what they're working on next.
Dude, okay, can I pitch you something that I
I'll
that
tell you, I'll give you my from software pitch and you give me yours first.
oh, I have to go first. No, that's bullshit.
Yeah, dude. I want to hear it. You offered.
Yeah, but now I didn't know at the time that you had one. I should have assumed.
Oh, I've had one for 10 years. Let's hear yours.
Okay, mine's not going to be as creative as yours. Well, there
Oh,
was essentially one that was okay. If they make a Bloodborne sequel, but they
mhm,
make it open world,
mhm.
and they essentially model it similar to the Elden Ring DLC. Not so much the base game, because I think that level of size
Mm,
doesn't. If you were going to go with that level of size, I would want to do something that was kind of like What Dreams May Come, like Dante's Inferno.
yeah.
Um, but essentially, the idea that your character leaving Yarnum is now crossing the wider like continent and seeing the effects of like the church and
Oh, that'd be cool.
where the church has set up in different, so you're tracking the healing church in different villages, towns, and cities, and seeing how blood ministration has taken different forms in different cultures. So like parts of it, because there's parts in the Elden Ring DLC. The reason I mention is because like it's much more multicultural in how it feels. Like there's parts of it that feel like Rome, parts of it that feel like Greece, parts of it that feel
Yeah.
like China. Like actually, the base game has that too. I'll give them credit. That they have it in the, but like essentially, I'd want to see that type of multicultural aesthetic with the healing church setting up shop and like blood ministration and you the hunter similarly with a horse, but like imagine like the same thing where you're like, on a horse, like kind of like Torrent, but the horse is maybe similar to the horses you take to Canehurst Castle, those like gaunt
Mm,
gothic kind of.
spooky horse.
Yeah. I mean, this is essentially me pitching a Black Mirror game more and more, but but you're like, you're riding from town to town and city to city, and you're, the same thing, the geography, the the movement through different biomes, but like the limit is that it doesn't, because Elden Ring has a much wider biome basis.
Sure.
Like it's, you have snow. I would love to see that, but each one sticking pretty closely to the gothic horror aesthetic. But there's a lot that you can do in that. I would just want to see. I want to see them take that same sophisticated open world approach to Bloodborne, because it's like maybe my favorite video game ever. So yeah, but
No, yeah, that's a great idea. I could see them doing that and having it be about, I don't know, let's workshop this. Would it be like, so you're going out and you're seeing the effects of the healing church on the wider world? Would it be like a pilgrimage from place to place and like putting down the people that have set roots there kind of thing?
yeah, I actually thought it'd be interesting if your character was, because remember how you arrive in Yarnum looking for a cure.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe, I mean, narratively that they wouldn't do a sequel where you're like the same character, quote unquote, as the first game. They
Mhm.
just don't do that. But if it were me in charge, I'd be like, oh, it'd be cool if your character now leaves Yarnum, but the sickness you're infested with now is not the one that you originally had that caused you to go to Yarnum for the City Healing Church. Now the sickness is like, how can I cure my beasthood? Um,
They could do the unreliable narrator thing again if they did that in a way where towards the end you realize that you're not actually the good guy and you've been spreading your
mhm.
alien parasite stuff across the whole world.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can see that.
because
That'd be good.
you can then come across cities where like, and I would be it'd be really cool if they do a lot of the letter finding that they did in the first game,
Mm.
and maybe you can. I was thinking you could find the letters written by some of the seniors from the Healing Church, but like how many of them have become Lovecraftian horrors, that have like literally, some of them that are like, I was thinking I had an image of one of the cities you find maybe toward the end, where basically an evacuated city. There's no one left except the one, maybe the person from the Healing Church who started it, and that guy is now like
Mm.
a beast of such huge scale that he basically takes up the entire city. So when you're fighting him, it's kind of like moving between gothic skyscrapers that he's knocking down, kind of like a kaiju, and you're kind of running around this like, I don't know if you can picture what I'm trying to say, but it's like you just imagine, the arena is essentially a town square that you can literally chase
Oh
him,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I just
That'd be
like that type of combat on like with the gun and the saw cleaver, or the, like on a horse, would be really interesting,
yeah, that'd be great.
like musket
I
fire.
when I used to post on Twitter a lot, a thing I would do often was like fan cast and pitch ideas
Hmm.
and just to get feedback and stuff and see how who shared it, why they shared it, what people liked and didn't like.
Yeah.
And I think the one people hated the most, which I still think you could do it. It would be hard to do, but I still think you could do it. Was I was saying after doing The Last of Us on HBO, the next, property Sony should do is a Bloodborne prequel about the fall of Yharnam, where you follow a couple of main characters in a cast, and it's like one student at Bergenworth,
Hmm.
one person who's like a politician in Yharnam, one person who's like a digger down in the Chalice dungeons,
Yeah.
and like slowly over the course of a season, we found this marvel, and everyone's like the fervor of like the blood ministration and all the healing, everyone who is dying is being healed, and it's like this big religious experience. And then start to pepper in the, oh, this is not what we thought it was, and people feel desperate to hide it and cover it up. And then establishment of the hunters at the end of season one, season two, going out, the purges, and like, I think you could do it. You'd have to do it very carefully,
Hmm.
but I think it's possible to adapt that story, but it would not be the story in the game. That would have to be like the final season. But
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we had talked about this. I think we were texting about it, and I said I think We both agreed that what you'd want to do is have the first hunter appear in like the final two episodes of the first season,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you would have like a nice little genre shift where it would go from like moody gothic horror to like
The Western, essentially.
yeah, with a ton of
Yeah.
action and with
Yeah.
like a superhuman hunter, and like you could set up the character who becomes the hunter the first one. You could maybe set up Ludwig early on, and have him be the
Yeah.
hero of season one, and then he's the enemy of season two, where he has to face the the nameless hunter,
Mm.
which is something that I when I was thinking about the Bloodborne sequel, I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if one of the final bosses you have to face is a creature that was once the nameless hunter from the first game.
Oh, that'd be dope.
So you're kind of
I'd like
fighting
that.
yourself.
They sort of did that in Dark Souls 3 with Soul of Cinder, where you're like, oh, this is the player character from Dark Souls 1 and 2. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that when I fought him. Um,
Yeah, he they're like it's the guy who linked the flame after Gwyn, and he uses the movesets that you as a player had in Dark Souls 1. He casts the spells that you had access to and like has animations that you had as a player. And it's like, oh, it's like this weird little Easter egg that like you're fighting essentially yourself.
I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
I
it
love
was a
that
cool
idea.
idea.
Yeah, it is really cool. Because
I might oh go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, I want to hear.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
I don't remember.
Damn it. That's my line. God damn it. You just did the thing to me that I do. Anyway, my pitch for a From Software game that I've wanted for like a decade,
Yes, hit me.
I want them to do a hard turn and do the 1970s Ridley Scott sci-fi aesthetic, the like gross lived-in Alien 1 vibe.
Oh
Not
shit!
Alien, not Aliens, Alien 1. I want it to be very lonely, and I want it to be you're out on a space station, and it's this massive space station that's also connected to a world with ruins on it, like a Metroid game. So you've got the weird Lovecrafty, what was the civilization that died, all the cool world building they do of this dead planet and all the dead cities that are on it, infinite opportunities for cool sci-fi monsters, but also you've got the human stuff of like there's some crashed ships, there's an abandoned space station that maybe you're the only survivor that woke up on, and to tie into the mechanics that they always use of how do you die and keep coming back, how do you not, how is death not permanent in this world. I think we do the thing where we finally deconstruct the multiverse, and because I'm sick of multiverses, and I think the twist at the end of the game is every time you come back to life, you're essentially killing and hijacking an alternate you from somewhere else and pulling them into the world and
Mm.
incepting your mind into it. And then have some kind of payoff with whatever the final boss is going to be of however many versions of alternate you killed to get to this point has some kind of payoff. But I would love to see them tackle outer space on like a weird planet with like ruins, and you could go really hard into the Lovecraft stuff that way, but also I want to see them do some like junky sci-fi.
I think that would be fantastic. I think they would probably make that really work. Okay. So if you're gonna do Lovecraft, you said you're thinking Lovecraftian science fiction mixed in with that, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm thinking like there's some really great Lovecraft stories about like what is it, like the Forgotten City, or where like the archaeologist finds this place and he keeps going deeper and deeper until eventually he realizes he's like turning into one of the monsters.
mhm.
I think you could do like there's so many cool opportunities for if you were on some abandoned planet out in space, like some crazy culture that was there, some huge dead city that's like half swallowed by some desert on some alien world, and like the deeper into it you go, the more weird stuff you find. Like there's so many good opportunities for Lovecraft stuff there.
Yeah. Would you want to see any like Clive Barker elements?
Oh sure, I love Clive Barker.
Like, I mean, because when you're talking about space, fiction, I'm like, oh, and like with their aesthetic, like you could get some great Hellraiser esque kind of characters
Sure, yeah.
as enemies.
I mean, there's usually three-ish factions in every From Software conflict. There's usually like the supernatural deity type things that are above the conflict, and then there's like side A and side B on the ground, kind of.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they always do that, and it always seems to work. And I think if you were to do that in this world, then the kind of cosmic Clive Barkery entities could maybe be, I don't know, some kind of advanced alien species that also tried to conquer this Lovecrafty planet and failed, and like are like haunting it, sort of. some sort of like some pre they always that trying to think of an example of it where it's like a previous civilization that found the place that you're now finding and tried to tame the thing that you're now trying to tame and it backfired horribly,
Yeah, that's
but like they still want it, you know.
yeah. Yeah, that's a particular genre, right? It's like and it doesn't we don't really get tired of that as a culture. We just really like
Yeah,
that.
which is also in Bloodborne, which is like, you know, the former like
Hmm.
Queen of Yharnam and all that stuff. Like they thought they could, you know, tame the blood and whatever. They had to bury it, and someone else came and dug it up again. But yeah,
Right.
I think I'd love to see them do junky 70s sci-fi.
Sure. Yeah. That'd be cool as hell. I mean, um, do you ever think that they would do it?
I think Miyazaki might be interested in not doing fantasy after Elden Ring because I think Dark Souls 1 or Demon Souls was like, okay, we're basically making Kingsfield, but we're going to do it for this new console and it's going to look prettier, but it's essentially Kingsfield.
Hmm.
And then they were like, okay, that did well. Now we can take some of the cutting room floor ideas we had for that and do it in Dark Souls because we found enough of a cult to do this.
Yeah.
And then that, you know, Dark Souls was unfinished when they released it. It still is. There's massive parts of that game that never got done. So then they were like, okay, we can do another thing. And he wanted to do Bloodborne because he just did two fantasy games. But I think Elden Ring is kind of like, where else do you go fantasy wise after this? Like, there's really, I don't know. I'm sure they could find a way. If anyone could find a way, it's them. But like, really, what else are you gonna do? Like, you kind of left it all on the field with that. Like, we've seen every possible environment in that setting, essentially, unless
Hmm.
you really go nuts. We've seen every, you know, version of every Dungeons and Dragons monster, their version of it at this point. Like, I don't know. I think he might be the same way they did that weird left turn with Bloodborne. I think he might be looking for an alternate thing to kind of sink his teeth into.
Yeah. I mean, they did. They sort of branched into that with what's that mech battle game?
Oh, Armored Core.
Armored Core. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, which has been a franchise of theirs for years that they just kind of let be dormant.
Yeah. I never really played it. It never. It apparently it's even more difficult than their typical stuff, which is like, oh, great.
It's very difficult. It's very different from the Souls games. There's a little bit of similarity in some of the game mechanics, but like
Hmm.
it's not going to play like Elden Ring. You're not going to dive into it and feel like, oh, this is familiar. Very different kind of game.
Yeah. But you liked it or?
I love those games. Yeah, they're great. They're definitely not like you're not going to dive in like even Sekiro. Like it wasn't a Souls game, but like you dive in and it feels cozy. It's like, oh, I kind of know this vibe they're going for. It's like a feudal Japan version of this other thing that I've played.
Yeah.
Armored Core is not that. Armored Core is it's got the loneliness and it's got the vagueness of like the lore. There's like stuff for interpretation and there's lots of like item description reading and there's lots of like lonely vistas, but it's extremely just action combat, kit out your mech, customize it, fight things, rinse repeat. You know, it's also very on rails. It's like levels.
Hmm.
There's exploration inside the levels, but some of them are just on rails, like follow this train, blow it up before it gets to its destination. You know, good luck.
Yeah.
But
Good luck.
yeah, it's fun. It's just not it's not the same thing you're gonna get out of a Souls game.
Yeah. And
But yeah.
I could see that being like for people that are hardcore Souls people that might be disappointing.
Yeah, I think people were hoping that because there was a lot of Armored Core games that came out a while ago, and I think they were kind of hoping with the newer one that they brought more of what they had learned and sort of changed the format, but they did a little bit, but not much. They kept it pretty faithful to the franchise. But I think people were hoping they were going to shake it up a lot more.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that you went for that. You said that you would, love to see them handle science fiction because you are much more of a fantasy guy in terms of what you enjoy consuming.
Yeah, but I also wasn't a Lovecraft guy until they did Bloodborne.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
then I was like, "Oh, you made me love this thing that I never had any connection to, and now I love it."
Have you seen that video where this guy breaks it down where he's like, "Yeah, but this is as much medical horror as it is Lovecraft," and he
Yeah,
talks, yeah, which is like very true. It's like the medical horror of the, which is interesting to see a Japanese. writer, creator tackle like European medical horror from this
Yeah,
17th
absolutely.
century.
It's like for a lot of people, the scariest possible thing that could happen to you in the 1800s was getting pregnant, and that's like essentially bloodborne, like to a T. Is like the horrors of childbirth is like kind of the undercurrent of all the themes in the game.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
like they live like there's a level called the Nightmare of Mensis. Like it's like we're not being subtle here. Like this is very obviously like the whole central theme of the game is that a god baby was simultaneously born and not born, and where is he, and everyone's going insane.
yeah. Yeah,
But yeah,
and that's one of those things that it's funny to try to explain that to your fiance when she's next to you, being like, "Why is this called Nightmare of Mensis?" And like,
yeah.
why are you fighting creatures that look nothing like babies? I was like, "Well,
Well, you know yeah, and then you realize like I don't know, like everything in that game is themed around childbirth and motherhood, and like it's executed flawlessly. It's like it's great because
yeah,
if any familiarity with what the medical world was in the 1800s, when if a woman was emotional after having a kid, they recommended pulling all of her teeth out to
yeah."
like heal the mania. It's like it's fucking insane shit.
I mean
Insane shit.
that's the number one cause of negative emotion is people yanking your teeth out.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say people with teeth. You gotta get rid of. You
Oh,
gotta get rid of those things.
I get angry about my teeth all the time. It's true. The problem would definitely
But
be
yeah,
solved.
no. Medical horror from that time. Well, that's the other thing they do, the web thing they do that I was talking about, I think with you a while ago, is
Yeah,
like they'll start with a thing and they'll be like, okay, Lovecraft. And they'll be like, okay, so what are all the things inside Lovecraft? One of those things is written in the 1800s. So they go, okay, 1800s. What else is scary in the 1800s? And then, medical stuff. And it's like, okay, we've already got this thing with healing. We've got this thing with blood. We're going to tie in some medical things. What was the leading causes of death? And it's like, okay. And they start going down all these connected roads where you start with one thing and they just branch out flawlessly into all these other things that are relevant to that time period. Because like even even Dracula, like
hmm,
even the novel Dracula is essentially like a medical horror story once Van Helsing shows up.
yeah,
There's a ton of that book dedicated to like weird medical shit, and it's like it's very interesting because a lot of the horror of it, it's fear of the unknown, which is Lovecraft's whole thing. And back then, all that medical shit was unknown, which is why everybody was fucking terrified of it. So it connects thematically fairly flawlessly.
well, yeah, especially because it was like right when science was starting to become
Yeah,
the dominant way of thinking, the dominant think form
yeah,
over like faith, and so you get this like weird, creepy like. But then you have this creepy like relationship with science where it's kind of replacing people's idea with God, so they're giving it
yeah,
the same. They're putting a kind of irrational overemphasis on like whatever the current evidence is. So that's how you get crazy ideas like, oh, like, it's like the correlation, people thinking correlation is causality.
right.
So they're like, oh, well, this improved this person's condition, so it must work for other people. That's how you get electroshock therapy and
Yeah,
all that stuff, which
and
is
there's the weird thing of like when science started to take over, and there were no such thing as long-term trials because everything was new. If something worked immediately in the moment, they just assumed that it worked, and there was like there's no idea that there was going to be bad things down the road. Like you get like children with thalidomide and like
oh yeah,
crazy shit like that. Like that was also a big thing in the 1800s. Was just we've got the miracle cure, and then it's like, oh, actually, lobotomies, maybe not lobotomies for everything, actually. Like, but yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
It's that's why that game's great. They branched it out into all these things, and then one of my favorite little things in that game, oh god, one of my favorite little thematic moments in that game is,
hmm,
which ties into what we're talking about right now, is when you go to the college at Bergenworth in the Nightmare, and all the students are there wearing their proud little like I graduated caps, but they're all turning into gross, disgusting slugs and slime monsters, and it's
yeah,
like the pride of like I'm a learned man, and like you've done horrible, horrific things, but like I'm intelligent.
yeah. No, and oh god, there's so many things to unpack philosophically with that because it's like the you know the educated learned man thing is meant to signify that you have overcome your superstitious bias,
Yes, yes,
and yet they have a
yes,
totally irrational and insane allegiance to creatures that they can't even understand, like these Lovecraftian
yes.
monsters.
It's so good. It's so good. The game is just flawless. I think lore wise, it's probably my favorite thing they've done.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just there's every time you play it, there's just more things that come up, and you're like, oh, because it's
Yeah,
like the idea that the old great ones were so powerful that they caused
yeah,
a society to become secularized and then become fanatical in this at the same time. Like somehow
yes.
it's like it's you know
They're like,
it,
we don't need the church. We're men of science. Then they literally say a prayer about fearing the blood to each other, and
and
you're
they
like,
call
oh,
it the church, yeah.
yeah, oh no, like it's great.
And I love that it's built on the Christian aesthetic of like the Catholic kind of severity,
Yeah,
because it's almost like an alternate reality where we kind of approach the same way, but instead of discovering God, we discover God's plural, and we have this like, and and unlike the Catholic or the general Christian idea of God, where it's like a benevolent
mm,
figure, it's like they've fully accepted that the great old ones are totally indifferent to them and have no
yeah,
particular care for humanity, but we still want to figure out what we can get. It's just like really interesting because it takes it's specifically from the Gothic period, which was built around the idea that the heavens are like a place you go after you suffer on earth,
yeah.
and they're just
And
like
it's
fully stuck in that
man,
mindset. Sorry, go on.
no, no, no. One of my favorite things about the thing you're talking about right now is that character Alfred, I think his name is,
Mm-hmm.
the guy who's from like the church,
Yeah.
and he's like, clearly the merciful thing we can do for these vile blood drinkers to save them is to pound them into smithereens and fucking kill all of them. It's like, it's our duty as gracious, we love them and we have to help them, and the only way to do it is to grind them into filthy fucking pulp, and so they never fucking like the
Yeah.
weird like intolerant hatred
Oh, of
cloaked with
the
like
vile
I'm
bloods.
helping you. Yeah, that insane like I'm helping you and I'm the good guy and like I'm doing you a favor by absolutely ruining everything about you and killing you, and it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Very, very, very 1800s.
He's like, they besmirch the healing church with their vile blood.
Yes,
And I love that character because he's arguably, in terms of like his initial appeal, he's the most friendly, likable guy you meet in the game.
yes. And by the end of it, he's screaming at the top of his lungs, "Come back to life now, you immortal slut, with all your insides on the outside for all to see." And
Yeah, I
he's like,
love that. He's like, let's
it's
see you stir up more trouble in this sorry state. He's
it's
just,
so
it's
great.
great. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
he's a hard
awesome.
boss, man. Because remember, he has that once you fight him in that scene, he has that weird thing he does where you can't like attack him or something. It's like I
Yes.
forgot what is it like. It's like your strikes kind of bounce off of his hide. I don't know what the hell that is, but it was
He has I think it's because he puts that church bell on as a helmet and he gets like infinite poise.
that's what it is.
And it's
Yeah,
like nothing, like, and nothing is, yeah, it's also putting the church bell on as a helmet, just thematically, you're blind. You're blind and deaf. Like
yeah.
you're you're blind and deaf and you're a blunt object. Like it's such a thematically, it's such a good, it's just an awesome idea.
Yeah, and he fights with a giant blunt wagon wheel.
Yes, it's so good.
It's
But yeah,
great.
and then I don't know, and then the DLC introduced the League, which I also loved, where it was like, the Adventurer Society in the 1800s, like jolly good. Let's explore and have fun and kill everything we find. It's so much fun to kill everything and find just for bloody sport.
My
Woohoo! Like,
favorite part of that is when you step on scum in front of him, so that he goes yes. When you,
yeah, it's so great.
it's awesome, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
the Confederacy, I think the
yeah,
Confederates.
it's fucking awesome. It's just, I don't know. They have such a good ability to take everything, because it's essentially like Alan Quartermain in the Adventurers Club in London. It's
Yeah,
like, well, let's go find these vile creatures and bring them the glory of our society, and it's just murder and insane acts of violence, and like disguised as like we're just having jolly good fun
yeah.
because we're from blah blah blah.
Have you ever read any Solomon Kane?
Oh, I've read all of Solomon Kane. I like it more than Conan.
Bro, how have we not talked about this?
Dude, Solomon Kane is my favorite thing he ever wrote. Solomon Kane is, if people listening don't know what Solomon Kane is, Solomon Kane is a Puritan pilgrim who goes on quests and fights supernatural creatures to bring them the, the glory and purity of his faith. And in so doing, he becomes friends with like magic men and like voodoo people and like practitioners of like demonic faiths. And like he gets like a staff that can repel magic from one of them. And like he employs the tools of his enemies against them. And like he's like he's like the prototype for so many things. He's like a prototype for like Doctor Strange. He's a prototype for like Hellblazer. He's a prototype for, man, he's such a good character. And he's always does these awesome inner monologues about purifying and bringing the, the fear of God back to these heathens. And it's, oh man,
I
it's so awesome.
Dan, I don't know what happens with you sometimes, but I sometimes I wonder if like we're like the same person. I don't know what the hell that is, but like, it freaks me out a little bit that I met you when I'm 38 because I feel like if we were together in high school, we wouldn't have made any other friends, or at least I wouldn't have. But
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying.
like because Solomon Kane, I agree. I love him way more than Conan. I agree that
Oh yeah.
he's Robert E. Howard's greatest creation, and
Yep.
he might even be my favorite fictional character ever. I'm
He's up there. The fact that there hasn't been a good Solomon Kane adaptation blows my mind because
drives me nuts.
when I was watching The Witch and our boy was talking the whole time, what went we now into the wilderness? I was like, why isn't this just a Solomon Kane movie? Why isn't this a Solomon Kane movie? And the dad is just going out as Solomon Kane because like just give me it. I need that aesthetic. I just need it.
Well,
It's so good.
I need Robert Eggers to make a Solomon Kane movie. I would love that, and
No.
that actor who from The Witch who plays the father, who the one who I joked about him making a great Black Marrow, at least for the
Yeah,
voice,
yeah, yeah.
that he would actually be a fantastic Solomon Kane.
He'd be
He
awesome.
might be aging out of it now, but I always thought Daniel Day Lewis would be great for it.
Oh, he'd be great. Solomon Kane is supposed to be older though. He is supposed to be an older guy. He's
Yeah,
not he's not in his 30s.
yeah, he's I think he's pushing like mid 40s at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely, and I adore Solomon Kane as a character. Like I love
Yep.
he manages to be really interesting in his flaws, but he's also like I think what makes him so someone was comparing him to Conan and what they said was really interesting. They said Conan the appeal of Conan the Barbarian is that there's a kind of he's more about freedom. Like
Yeah.
he's more about the power fantasy of being like a wild man free to go and have adventures and fuck whoever you want and kill monsters and stuff. He's not really
Hmm.
guided by any particular code, which is what makes him fun. Is that he's just kind of like, he's the hero in a lot of the stories, but it's more incidental. It's not like he's going out looking for evil to vanquish. He's just like,
Yeah.
oh,
It
this
comes
is
and finds him.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, like I love one of the stories where he fights a giant serpent because the woman that they're trying to sacrifice to the serpent is really hot.
Yeah.
And like his whole motivation is like if I rescue this woman, she might totally
Yeah.
touch my little Conan, and so he's like, I'm gonna just go for it.
Absolutely.
Whereas I love that Solomon Kane is like, yeah, he's nuts. He's a little bit nuts, but he's also completely incorruptible. Like I
Yeah.
love the. I forgot what it's called. It's one of the stories. It's like one of the early ones where he's kind of introduced, and it's where he tracks down that pirate to the edge of the world
Yep.
because of a woman who
Yep.
died like a year earlier. And there's this
Hmm.
great, for anyone who hasn't read Solomon Kane, it's one of the most badass moments in like fiction where this guy, this French pirate, I think he's called the Wolf. He's like, why do you avenge this girl? Was she a lover of yours? And Solomon Kane is like, no. He's like, I never even knew her name. All I know is that
Yep.
you killed this innocent person, and I've just like sworn to God that I would find you and utterly destroy you. And it's just incredibly he's incredibly badass. He says things that are like bonkers crazy, like Robert E. Howard racist stuff, which is like some great turn of the century shit.
He dips into that for
Yeah.
sure. I
Yeah.
think my favorite thing about Solomon Kane is it's essentially like if you read Conan and then Solomon Kane, they're almost exact opposites.
Yeah.
Conan is all about impulse and like what do I want in the moment
Mhm.
and like I'll just do this thing. Solomon Kane's about grand design and there's a higher purpose.
Yeah.
Conan, the adventurers come and find Conan. Solomon Kane, he'll walk around the globe looking for the trouble because he's here to serve a higher purpose.
Yeah.
Conan's kind of dumb. Solomon Kane is incredibly learned.
Yeah.
Conan's not afraid of anything. Solomon Kane is afraid of so many things. But he's like, I've got this faith that's going to protect me. But like, there's he's always talking about there's evils in the world, and Conan doesn't believe in magic, but he knows enough to fear it.
Hmm.
Solomon Kane believes in all the magic.
Yeah.
he sometimes he uses the magic, but like, yeah, they're great. They're very very opposite characters.
Yeah. And then have you ever watched that Solomon Kane movie that came out like 15 years ago?
Oh, one time, and I was like, no.
I got literally I got 5 minutes in and I was like, I can't do this.
I got to
Um,
the James Bond scene where they were like at the Vatican showing him all the new weapons they designed for hunting monsters or
nope,
something.
that's not at all his vibe.
Wait, am I mixing it up with the Van Helsing
Oh,
movie?
you might be. Yeah, I never even saw, so I can't. I've seen Van Helsing, and I thought that was
The
hilarious.
advertising for those two movies is almost identical. I
Yeah,
might be mixing them up. Fuck, I might be. Maybe I
The
haven't
Solomon
seen.
Kane movie, it doesn't seem to have like gadgets. Like in terms of his combat and his look, it's very faithful to the book.
Okay.
But I dropped out of that movie after the first 5 minutes because they try to give him a very generic origin where it's like they introduce him and it's kind of like the beginning of the movie The Shadow with Alec Baldwin, where it's like
No,
he
no.
was a criminal and he was terrible and then he has a demon that he owes his soul to, so because of that he tries to be better, and like that's his motivation,
Oh,
which
so
is
it's
like,
just Hellblazer. It's
yeah,
just
and it's
yeah.
so lame because like the whole point, the thing that makes it's like the complete misinterpretation of what makes Solomon Kane interesting, which is that he just wants to do it because he thinks that God's telling him to do it. Like his whole
Okay,
thing.
I'm absolutely thinking of the shitty Van Helsing movie then,
Yeah,
because I don't think I've seen the Solomon Kane movie.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the actor who plays Solomon Kane is actually really well cast. But what holds
Mm,
the movie back is that the studio. This is after I think Batman Begins came out, and the studio was like, "You got to give him an origin story. We don't care what it is." And they were like, "We really don't want to. Like, we really want to start it the way it starts in the
yeah,
book, where we don't know." And they were like, "Too bad, you have to do it." So they were like, "Okay." So they gave him this origin, which is kind of like lame and boring because it's just
that's
it's yeah, it's a generic redemption. I used to be a badass bad guy. Now I'm gonna be a farmer until someone kills my wife, and now I'm spurred into revenge. And it's like that's not really Solomon Kane. I always like the idea that he's purely powered by religious fervor, and like that's the
yeah,
source of all of his courage. He's not necessarily making up for some sin. He's just like a religious fanatic, and like
yeah.
that's his
He's a
whole
religious
vibe.
fanatic. It's
Yeah.
essentially if you took one of the judges from the
Hmm.
Salem witch trials and made them not as murderous, but it made them go after like demons. It's like that kind of like insane fervor.
Yeah. Well, I something I really like is this one guy said that Solomon Kane is like if you took anyone from the Salem witch trials and you pretended that they were right. Essentially, like, oh, you know what, the world is covered in witches and evil spirits, and actually the fanatical guy with the torch is actually like he's killing the right people, like it's like someone experimented with a flip reality in which that wasn't a
Yeah,
crazy thing to do and you were actually right. And but yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons we haven't gotten a good Solomon Kane movie is because if you were to make it now, they probably wouldn't make him religious. They would probably try to avoid that.
yeah, which is kind of necessary because Solomon Kane's not supposed to be like he's like a flawed good guy. He's almost an anti-hero.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think we're gonna get something like that unless it's a very long form adaptation, like a 10 episode HBO thing where they can really explore how somebody gets like that. I don't think we're gonna see a movie of it though.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would love to see like Mel Gibson make that movie.
Anybody could. I mean,
Yeah.
he'd
Like,
probably cast himself in the role and do a later day one. Like I was hoping they were gonna do for Conan with like old Arnold
yeah, that
as
almost
like
happened.
I know it would have been fucking amazing.
Well, what's her face didn't want to do it. Um,
Oh man.
did you hear about it? The lady who runs, I think, Amazon, Jennifer Sulkey, I think.
I I heard that it was in development and it got canceled. That's all I heard.
Yeah, basically it got bought out. This other lady was put in charge, and she was like, she's basically, I mean, I'm sure she's a wonderful person, but she was just like, I don't get it. I don't get the appeal. I don't want it. And they were like, really? Because there's like a lot of people that would watch this, and she's like, no. She's just like shit canned it.
I would have done Arnold finally gets the kingdom by his own hand, like he always says in the intro to the old Conan movies. You know, someday I'll forge a kingdom by my own hand, whatever. He gets his kingdom. He doesn't have an heir. That's the curse. He gets a kingdom, but he's denied a legacy. For some reason, he can't have a kid. And then they would have it revealed, out of the plot twist be,
Mhm.
he can't have a kid because in the very first Conan movie, he fucked that wolf witch and he gave in to his temptation. And I would have it be that her son, almost like a Mordred character, shows up and is like, I'm your heir. And he's like, half wolf witch demon, half Conan.
This is cool.
I would have that be the twist. Because if it's Conan hanging out with a son who's not quite as manly and that's the central plot, it's going to suck.
Oh my God. You could see them doing that though, right?
I could absolutely see them doing it and it would suck
You could see them
horribly.
like his son is Michael Cera and he's like,
Yes, exactly. It would have to be Conan gets his kingdom, but he doesn't get his legacy. It would have to be some little monkey's paw type thing of
Yeah.
like, oh, your dream came true, but it's, you're going to have to defend it because after you're gone, there's no one to take up your mantle.
So would it be, I'm assuming the resolution or the climax is him facing off against his own son, right?
If they go that route, the
Yeah.
route that I would go, I would have it be, would be facing the consequences of your past would be the theme because
Yeah.
we kind of never got a resolution to what happened with that ghost. He has sex with the witch. She turns into a demon. He throws her into a fire, and then she turns into a spirit and flies away, seemingly, with his seed still inside of her.
Dating in the city, am I right, guys?
But yeah, it's I don't know. I would like to see a resolution to that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Something.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they just do the boring Thulsa Dune's back. Ooh,
He's a disembodied spirit now, and we have AI James Earl Jones.
And we have Oscar Isaac say somehow Thulsa Dune came back. Never what's going on. Oh my God, Thulsa Dune, he's back.
Do you think maybe that's one of the most notorious lines of dialogue in film history? Is somehow Palpatine?
I think it's certainly one of the laziest. Yeah, if not notorious, one of the laziest.
If you actually look into Oscar Isaac's eyes when he says that line, you can see his soul leave his body for a second.
Yes. You can see him reading all of his future contracts very carefully in that moment. You can see the way he does business change for perpetuity.
Yeah.
In that moment.
You can see Duke Atreides hiding behind it as like a future for him because he's like, I'm not doing this shit again. But I wanted to ask what you thought of that. You heard Kathleen Kennedy said she's stepping down.
I didn't hear that.
Oh yeah, it's been news for the past 24 hours. Everybody's talking about it.
Oh my God.
She is finally announcing her or rather she hasn't formally announced it yet, but it's pretty much like hitting all the news outlets that she's basically preparing to let everybody know she's done. She's stepping down.
Who's taking over the Star Wars and Indiana Jones properties?
Nobody knows yet, but speculation is that it's going to be this woman who's her right hand, and it's like, okay, then nothing's going to change if it's someone who was close to her. I don't even know if it would change if it was Jon Favreau or what's his face with the cowboy hat. I forgot that guy's name.
Oh yeah, Dave Filoni.
Yeah, he's been kind of a disappointment.
Yeah. Shit. Well, let's hope for the best. I don't know. They the only thing that's had critical success from the Lucasfilm properties they acquired so far are The Mandalorian and the Indiana Jones Great Circle game.
Oh yeah, I heard that was great.
So those are two things, Dave Filoni did one and someone completely unconnected to them did the other. So hopefully they can sort of read the room and go, oh, okay.
Oh, hey guys. What's up, Eduardo? Nicholas DeLuca says, I swore when I saw the trailer it was going to be a Palpatine ghost inhabiting the fallen Death Star, which would be the thing that they would have to face as a mini boss.
That'd be great.
That would have been better. Yeah, that would have been much better.
Death Star was just a haunted house. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Here we are. Every conversation, we come back to it.
There's
the trauma.
So many things they could have done that didn't do. Like, I still can't believe how they did like incredible gymnastics just to avoid the best ideas.
I forgot until recently because I saw a screenshot of it in a YouTube thumbnail. I forgot that at the end of that movie, everyone in the universe comes to fight in a big Lord of the Rings style battle just because. And there's no motivation. It's just 10,000 starships piloted by all their friends.
Yeah.
Show up and it's like, whoa, like, oh.
Yeah, that movie was directed by a kid with action figures who just yeah.
Well, you're not alone, kid, or whatever the fuck Lando says. Not alone.
I don't think he knew where he was when he did that scene. I think he was like, "I say what? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Where's the buffet?" Um,
I hated how accurate what Mike Stacklasa said in the review, where he was like, when they were in the bar and there was a guy with a mask sitting in the background who didn't get off his chair, I knew that was lined up because he didn't want to get up. And I was like, oh no. Oh no. It's so true.
that's really funny. I could definitely see that being true for sure. Um, well, Taco Force. So Taco Force says Dave Filoni is the only person to do Star Wars right. I used to think that, and then I saw some of Ahsoka, which I believe was like his baby, and I don't know if anyone else has seen it.
You had to watch all of Rebels to watch Ahsoka. That's the only problem with Ahsoka is you have to watch all of Rebels.
Do you think? Well, because I know people who've seen Rebels and they didn't like Ahsoka, so like I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe.
then well, I can't say watching Rebels will make you like it. It'll just make sense because
Oh,
nothing in that show would make sense because you don't even know who the characters they're talking about are. You're like, who's Thrawn? Who's this? Who's this kid? Who's what? Like, they don't really
yeah.
explain who's Ezra. They don't explain any of that. They're just like, we got to go get Ezra. And you're like, who the fuck is that?
I knew
Yeah,
Ezra. I knew Thrawn rather from the extended universe novels, which I used to like love. But
yeah,
and I got so excited when he was coming in, and then they kind of wrote him as like he's such a dumb villain. Like he just kind of like there's this like
yeah,
there's so many scenes. Someone said he was like the copious villain they've ever seen, where it was like every time he messes up, he's like, didn't I figure? And it's like, no, you didn't. They literally got away again, and it's like he just keeps
yeah. He's always one chess move ahead because he's so genius.
yeah, and then it's like
All his, it's yeah, it's sad.
because you keep waiting for that moment where it's like he twists everything on them, and it's like, oh my god, and then it just like never happens.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
Nick,
unfortunate. He does more smart stuff in the Rebel show, but you'd have to watch so much of that to get to Thrawn. But
yeah.
yeah,
Nicholas DeLuca says, I wanted to get your opinion on the prequels if there was one change to make. Do you think having Dooku just be a Jedi that left the Order instead of a Sith and a pawn of Palpatine would. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
if there was one change to make in the prequels,
Yeah. That
I
he.
would do unironically. I would do the thing that Mike suggested. Unironically, I would get rid of Qui Gon Jinn completely and just have it be about Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, even though I love Liam Neeson,
Yeah,
I do feel like it's a little cluttered, that first movie. That feels like you could really.
yeah.
It's like that was a really good chance to make it about Obi-Wan and well, I love yeah. Did I miss it? Did you just quote Mike Stoklaska where he says Qui Gon and Obi Wan should be combined in a character called Obi Wan?
I didn't quote it, but that's what I'm referencing.
Yeah,
Yes, because I think the way you invert it, if the original trilogy with Luke is about an orphan discovering his father and coming to terms with it, I think the prequels should be about a father losing his son and coming to terms with it. And it should be the whole trilogy should have been I have a kid now. His name's Anakin. I found this orphan. I'm training him. I'm losing him. What do I do about losing him? If the first trilogy is about finding a dad and coming to terms with him being an asshole, the second trilogy is about a father having a son and coming to terms with the fact that he's an asshole. It's like it's right there. There's too many characters in those prequel movies. Just cut half of the characters, make it about Obi-Wan and Anakin. That's it. Just that should have been the central thing for all of them. Obi-Wan, Anakin, have Palpatine be there as the stepdad who's like, I'll give you everything you want. I'll buy you a car. Yeah, come party at my house. Fuck, your dad's an asshole. Like, just do that.
I
Just do
mean
that. I have this. Yeah,
you're kind of describing the plot of Karate Kid,
yeah. Essentially, yeah. I,
which
I
I'm
think
okay with.
that's yeah. I think that's what it should have been about. The whole thing should have been about Obi-Wan and Anakin, but I don't know. There's so much unnecessary shit in those movies.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I mean. Well, Edgar says just give the prequels better dialogue. I agree with that. If you just like rewrite some of that dialogue, that movie is, and generally speaking, I think the plot of the prequels, I think they have a great setup for a lot of that stuff. I love
Yeah.
you just sneeze. God bless you. Um,
Sorry.
like I love the idea um, of that Palpatine is secretly like basically in charge of both sides of the war,
Yeah,
so that
that's great.
he can weaken the economy and slowly take over. Like that's a brilliant villain move right there.
Yeah.
Like I love that shit. But then yeah, I just think there's there's like I like George Lucas as a person. I think he seems like a really nice guy. There were some choices he made that I think people really, really didn't like. Like, why did Like, I know Hayden Christensen has said some in the past. I think he said something like that. He did many different takes, but George would often take the one that made Anakin seem more kind of whiny. I don't know what word he used.
Well, you've heard the Mark Hamill quote about the line of dialogue that he told George had to come out of the script, right?
No, which one? I don't know
When
this.
he's like, George, people don't talk like this. And he like they pulled him aside and they were like, I can say this line, but this will like no matter how good the special effects are, this movie's over. Um there's a good clip because Mark Hamill memorized it because it was so bad, and there's a really good clip of him in the 70s reciting it from memory on a talk show. Um Hold on, I can try and do it from memory, but I want to see it.
Okay.
Yeah, right. It was oh god. I need to find it. It's so long. It's so long and rambly. Um oh my god. It's a whole paragraph of stuff and then it ends with but we can't turn back now. Fear is their greatest defense was the last line. I remember that part. But there's a whole thing before it where it's like, it can't be more than 27 parsecs away from us. And they're clearly, we've shown up on their radar and they're going to notice us. And like, the Empire, blah, blah, blah. It's like just this rambly, long, insane line with no punctuation. And then it ends with, but we can't turn back now because fear is the greatest defense. And he's like, George, I can't. He's like, people don't speak like this. Like, people, this is not human dialogue. This is insane. Like, and yeah, that's just kind of, I don't know. He's not a very good writer. He's a good world builder, but he's not a very good writer.
Yeah, I feel like with the prequels, I think it's like he didn't really. I know that when he made the original movies, he had more people helping him edit the scripts, and I think didn't he also like
Yeah.
have a co-writer for some of them? Like I think Empire or
Oh, you want to know the craziest thing about the original Star Wars movie? His wife is the reason that movie succeeded.
oh,
It's
because of
not
the
him.
editing, right?
It's the editing.
Yeah.
Though, if anyone listening doesn't know this, this is insane. George Lucas's wife absolutely saved that fucking movie. It's insane. The entire ending sequence where the Death Star is going to blow up the Rebel base was not in the movie that George shot.
Really?
It's not in it. They did the run on the Death Star where the X-wings go and they're going to blow it up, but the entire B plot of Leia and all the generals in the place and the Death Star is coming around the corner of Yavin and it's going to blow it up and all our main characters might die. That is completely created through editing by her. It was not in the script. There's a great YouTube video if anyone wants to watch it called How Star Wars Was Saved in the Edit that shows all the things she cut out of the movie, including a third droid called Treadwell. Because originally it was C-3PO, R2-D2, and Treadwell. Completely cut that droid out, completely cut a ton of scenes out.
Why did they need a third droid in that story?
Was her name Marsha? Yeah, Marsha Lucas. Yes. So absolutely insane. So if you go back and you rewatch those shots of the Death Star coming around to blow up the planet at the end, it's shots that are reused from previously in the movie that are spliced together to make it seem like it's happening in a different place, but it's the exact same shots. Some of them are flipped and there's a little bit of change with like the color temperature, I think. But all of that at the end, because I guess the original cut of the movie, the rebels just go do their thing and then the X-Wings go blow up the Death Star and there's no ticking clock element. There's no everyone's in danger. There's no it's going to blow up the planet. There's no stakes. It's just they go do this, end of the movie. All of that shit where you're like ramping up and it's like dun 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 dun, and it just keeps building and building with the laser's going to come and it's counting down 3, 2, 1. I'm like, oh no. All of that was done by Marcia. George didn't do any of that, which is wild, absolutely insane. But yeah.
So hearing that, do you think as a filmmaker that he kind of failed upward? I mean, like I think he's got a great imagination. I think that the prequels were kind of evidence that like he needs,
I think
from an
he's like,
artistic standpoint, someone else should direct sometimes.
I think he's like one of those. So I'm not a sports guy. I don't know anything about sports. I'm gonna make a sports analogy.
Oh, brace yourself.
Actually, no. Actually, I don't have to make a sports analogy. I'll make a music analogy.
Okay.
David Lee Roth is a very good guitar player, but when he's not in Van Halen, nobody fucking cares. And that's how I feel about George Lucas. He's extremely good at what he does when he's on the right team. And
Sure.
when he's not on that team and he's doing his own, so it's like Freddie Mercury leaving Queen. It's like you're a great singer, but you're not in Queen anymore. Nobody gives a fuck. It's like George is a very good singer, but when he's not in the right band, it sucks. It's like, oh, you need a team of people around you who can tell you no to the right things. Like everybody should have a comfortable group of creative partners around them at any given time that can tell them when they have a bad idea or yes and it into a good idea.
Hmm.
Like it doesn't have to be destructive criticism like, hey, don't do that. It can be constructive criticism like, that's a really good way to start it. Let's build it out in this direction. Or, oh, what if you add this to it? Or, oh, that's really cool. What if you take it even further? Like I think he's really good at collaborating, but when he's alone and he has total control, it blows. He's not one of those directors where total control is a good thing like Tarantino. He's very much like a collaborative guy.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's the vibe I get.
Yeah. I think that's well. Tarantino is someone who I often do like his stuff, but I also feel like I mean I know that that's not you're making a point. I get it. But
Yeah,
he's someone who people I think God, having watched a lot of the movies that inspired him, I was
yeah.
like, oh, a lot of the credit people give Tarantino belongs with like Sergio Leone and like
Mhm.
Sergio Carbucci and some of those early filmmakers because it was like, oh, he's just like kind of doing a remix of his favorite westerns, and that's cool. Like enjoy that.
Which is also George Lucas.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
they're both similarly, but also I would imagine all the great artists are kind of just doing that, in some
Yeah,
way. Um,
100%.
Taco says, I think every creative is like this. So yeah, I think to some extent that's true. I think a lot of people, I think with George Lucas, it's particularly pronounced because I think people like he's the face of Star Wars.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people assumed that he was a genius operating in a vacuum.
He also has a very bad habit. He has a bad habit of starting before he has his script figured out, and then he starts all the pre-production and all the special effects, and he starts spending money like it's a fucking fire hose. But the script isn't done. Like there's the behind the scenes footage of the prequels where he walks out mid production of the movie. They're already shooting, and he's like, "I have a finished script finally. Almost finished. There's a lot of they fight in there." And it's like you're already filming the movie, dude. But then if you go back to the 70s, I didn't even know this till recently. They were at the end of filming Return of the Jedi, and they couldn't get the scene right between Luke and Vader, and they were like, "There's no stakes here." It's sort of like what happened in the first movie I just talked about that
Mm-hmm.
Marsha fixed. They were like, "There's no stakes in this fight. Like, I don't believe that Luke's going to turn to the dark side." And then they figured out on the set, oh, it should be Vader threatening to turn Leia evil. That's what makes him snap. That wasn't in the fucking script. You didn't
Wow,
even, they just figured it out because they had to find something to make it even more intense in the moment. It's like,
that's
what are we
hilarious.
doing? It's insane. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
Like,
and then it just comes together, and then it's just like this classic movie.
yes,
um,
and that's why you get the failing up thing of like, if he was alone working on those things on his own, and there wasn't a group of people around him to help him workshop things that weren't working, or find ways to fix boring stuff, or change the pacing or the editing, like I don't know, like Marsha Lucas should have gotten a huge percentage of that movie's revenue, but yeah, I
yeah,
don't know. It's
that's
unfortunate.
interesting. Well, I mean, I mean, I'm sure she got pretty wealthy off that. If she didn't, that'd be a shame. But
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about her. She's one of those people that did a lot and never got the spotlight for it and just kind of faded away. There's a bunch of people like that, especially because it was the 70s, not surprisingly female people,
yeah,
where like they did a ton of work and just kind of,
unfortunate female people.
yes, just kind of weren't around in the spotlight. They just kind of had the credit taken away from
Yeah,
them, even though they did these big important things. And it's like, I don't know. I'd argue that if you have that much, like that ending scene of Star Wars where it's pretty fucking important. I'd argue that you should get a co-writer credit.
yeah. At that point,
That's at that point, if you're changing that much of the plot, I'd argue that it should be co-written by, but
I will say
hey,
though, as someone who's done some stuff in film, like as a as an art guy, mostly storyboards and stuff. But I've seen a lot of like how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
what you're describing, I think, I mean, I won't argue that in the 70s it was very prevalent sexism, but like if you look at it now, it's just very, it still goes on, but it's not even gender based. It's just, somebody makes a movie, the director gets accolades and praise,
Yeah.
even though like, the a lot of the people working on the movie basically talked him out of some of his worst ideas.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm just saying, like,
yeah,
in the 70s, movies weren't what they are now. Like, they cost money, yes, but they weren't these insane, massive productions with thousands of people and billions of dollars spent on them.
yeah,
It was like, a couple million here. We made a little movie. Hopefully it works out. So in the 70s, when the stakes are lower and there's not all this cash and investor capital behind a film, there was a lot of examples of like, oh, my wife helped me with this thing.
hmm,
And like,
yeah,
that wife never gets heard of again
yeah,
for the rest of time because
yeah,
like it was such a movie. Making a movie was so much smaller scale back then that something like your friend or your wife or your girlfriend coming in to help you with something was something that could happen and nobody would even have to know about it. There's
yeah.
stuff like that on The Godfather where like people just came in and helped him out and they weren't even like on the staff, they
Yeah.
weren't on the payroll,
It's like
just people he knew.
his dad's friend kind of thing, a
Yeah, it was
small
almost
role.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like the mentality of like, hey, we're recording a demo of my band in my garage. Like, do you want to come play? Like, it was like it feels almost that casual when you hear them talk about it.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like that's never going to happen again outside of indie films. So yeah, there's a lot of that.
yeah. That's I think that's definitely true. And man, it's also one of those things where like we need to go back to that a little bit. We need a little bit of that old school film jankiness because
Yes.
movies are better. Um,
Speaking of old skill film jankiness, I watched Crawl this past weekend.
okay, tell me all about it. It's one of my
Oh,
favorites.
tell me what you love about Crawl. I need to hear it.
Well, most of my appreciation of that movie is aesthetic.
Yes.
Because the plot is fairly paper thin, which is like kind of what you want because it's more of it's a fairy tale. It's not really meant to be like it's actually much. It feels like it's really more derived from pulp than it is from like high fantasy. Um, I mean, it obviously is like somebody trying to do Star Wars. But what I love most about it is probably James Horner's score, not in the least of which, or rather, most specifically, is "Ride of the Fire Mares" by James Horner, which
Very
is
good.
an incredible piece of music that I've literally listened to psych myself up before going into like job interviews. Um, yeah, that I would say the music. I love the Cyclops who predicts his own death. Uh, my favorite scene in the movie is probably when the bandits, the Cyclops, and the hero and the wizard, they all kind of have their It's a part in the swamp where they're confronted by the Slayers for the first time as a
Mhm.
group, and the it's like and this is like a really good moment where you can see the power that a score has in a movie, where it's like if it had been a different composer, it would have just been an action sequence, but what James Horner does with that scene is he makes it really emotionally like a little bit like potent because it's showing because he plays the theme the Krull
Mhm.
theme as they all start fighting together as if to say like they're learning how to work together and they're like and it's such a nice little scene that's it's in a vacuum it's like whatever who cares but I love the costumes. I love the weird sound effects when the Slayers get killed. They go, all that stuff is
Mhm.
great. I won't argue that it's a great movie because I'm pretty sure you can look at it and be like, "Wow, what a piece of shit." I'm sure a lot of people could, but
Mhm.
I just enjoy it.
I'm
um,
gonna tell you something that might blow your mind that I found out this week that I did not know till this week.
do it,
Do you know what Krull started as?
Buckaroo Banzai. No, what?
Krull started as a film called The Dragons of Krull, and it was supposed to be an attempt to get the rights to make a Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Oh, I've heard of this.
How insane!
Somebody mentioned this years ago. I never really looked into it. Yeah, I
How
heard.
insane! They couldn't get the rights to do Forgotten Realms, so they were like, "Well, Star Wars is let's mix it with sci-fi and make a Krull and like see what happens." And yeah, it's supposed to be a fucking D&D movie. Nuts.
Wow. Well, what do you think of it? The movie.
I think aesthetically, there's a lot of, well, now that I know that it was supposed to be a D&D movie, it makes a lot of sense because it feels like someone's campaign with their friends that they
Hmm.
shot on film. It's
Yeah,
like it's a bunch of people that aren't it feels like a movie made by like a team of five people that weren't talking to each other when they wrote the characters. Like they were all in different rooms separated, and it's like, I'm a cyclops who can predict my future, I'm big and strong, I'm a wizard who turns into animals but I just can't seem to get the spells right, I'm the noble prince who, my betrothed was taken from me on my wedding night and I have
yeah,
this magic weapon. It's like none of them really work together as a group, but they're all fun ideas individually, and they're just kind of thrown together in a quest that doesn't follow the beats of a hero's journey. It's just a series of vignettes where it's like, here's the spooky swamp where one of us sinks and we fight a monster. Here's a valley where we encounter some thieves. Here's this place where we go and we find mares that can ride on the. It's like a series of things that happen, but there's no like
it's not because of this, it's and then this.
yeah, exactly. It's not because and therefore, it's and then. It's a bunch of and then, which is the South Park writing thing that you're never supposed to do.
Hmm.
And it's very weird because it's a series of things that look and sound cool back to back to back to back. But like I've seen Crawl probably 20 times. I can't tell you why the wizard's girlfriend is inside the spider web. I can't tell you why there's a crystal spider there. I can't tell you why she has a magic hourglass that makes the spider stop. I don't She says something about she killed her baby and this is her punishment. Is the spider the baby? Why is she here? Who is she? Why does she get punished this? What is the purpose?
Who
It just
punished
feels
her?
like it
Yeah,
just feels like a scenario that like a dungeon master made up for something cool to make the players go through, but there's no explanation or logic or reason or skeleton of a plot to that movie. It's just thing, 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 thing.
yeah,
And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's fun to watch, but like it's completely incomprehensible.
yeah. No, the movie is it's a trip, man.
Yeah,
It's really strange, um, and that's why it's hard to see it sometimes because if you watch it as a kid, it just cements on your brain and you don't question it, you know.
yeah,
Um, like when he comes across the bandits and he's like, "You'll be
yeah.
my new crew," but then it's like the bandits exist like in a vacuum, like there's no civilians anywhere. Who are they robbing?
It just feels like it just
Like who are
feels
these people?
this is what I'm saying. It feels like they were playing a tabletop D&D game to write the script. I actually think they may have done this. I think they might have actually made a campaign and wrote the script based on their campaign because that encounter with the bandits feels like the DM said, you encounter a group of bandits, you're hopelessly outnumbered. And then the main character passed a charisma check and made them allies. That's the only way that makes sense in a script. Because
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
otherwise it makes no fucking sense. There's so many things in that movie that make no sense. And it's like the fire mares, it's a cool idea, but like logically, they don't set it up, they don't talk about them, they just show up out of nowhere and then they ride them through the sky. It feels like you're at the end of the campaign, but you're very far away from the villain, and the DM's like, how do we wrap this up? Oh, you're going to encounter this amazing,
Hmm.
mount that exists in the universe of this world suddenly, and it'll get you there magically overnight. Like, the more I think about it, the more I think it was just a D&D campaign.
That's very astute. I could see that. I think that's sensible. I would probably bet on it now that you've mentioned it. Honestly,
Yeah,
um, I well, yeah, especially the fire mares, but even the glaive when he come
yeah.
when he gets the weapon of the glaive, there isn't like a huge amount of setup for that. It just kind of happens.
It also feels like they're playing off the old D&D rule set from the 70s where it's like you found this magic weapon but you're not attuned to it yet, so you can't use it. And then over the course of the adventure he becomes attuned. That's what it's because he can't use it till the very end.
The thing is, though, now that you know that this was intended to be a Dungeons and Dragons movie, does it make you like it more?
Um it makes it it doesn't make me like it more. It just makes me understand the quirks because now I don't think anyone could convince me otherwise. I think it was they didn't know how to write the movie, so they made a campaign and they played a campaign and wrote down the beats. I legitimately think that they wanted to get a D&D movie made, so they played D&D, turned their session into a script, and then shot the script. I don't think anyone could convince me otherwise. Now that I know that, it just makes too much sense because
Yeah.
otherwise it's like, what are we doing? Like, there's not even that many like action scenes. It's just kind of like, here's a weird riddle, and like it just feels like a bunch of things you do in a tabletop game. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like a movie.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then there's a little coat of Star Wars paint on top with robot sentinels that for some reason ride regular horses.
Yeah. So what? Okay. So when I heard the first time I heard that this was originally supposed to be a D&D adaptation, I actually thought maybe when it became Krull, they were like, "Oh, we should add in some science fantasy elements because this Star Wars thing really took off." Um,
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I could see it. It feels like because also it's a weird thing where I don't know in what order the scenes of the movie were shot, and I don't know what were reshoots because the beginning of the movie has a budget, and then by the end of the movie, there's almost no budget.
yeah.
And there's parts in between that are literally just let's go outside in California and shoot something. And like I don't know if they had a big mess of scenes and they were like, okay, Star Wars is hot. Let's build the set for a castle and get some stormtrooper dudes and shoot an intro to set the movie up because those guys don't really come back till the very end. So that beginning of the movie could have been shot at the last part of filming just to try and make an establishing thing that ties it all together. Or it could have been, hey, let's build a set, shoot that first, and then they ran out of money later and couldn't keep it up. So
Yeah.
it's I don't know which. Could be either one.
Among the incomprehensible things is like the scene in the swamp I mentioned. Remember, they're escorting the old wizard who looks like Father Time,
Yeah.
and then he suddenly just becomes a Slayer, like he was replaced by one of them, and with no
Yeah, one
explanation.
comes up behind him, one comes up behind him out of nowhere. They haven't told you what a Slayer is yet. There's just another him is standing behind him, and then it cuts away and he's just dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like you haven't told us what this creature is. You haven't told us why it's here. You haven't told us its abilities. You haven't told us what it's doing. It just shows up, kills a guy, and then immediately dies. It's not like a tense thing. It dies like 5 minutes later.
Yeah, I think they figure it out and they kill it, and then yeah, it is interesting to see that like it does feel like they're kind of keeping it up as they're going. They're just like, yeah, and then
Yeah.
this happens, and then yeah, it is like
Which feels like there was a monster there in their campaign and someone failed a perception check, probably because they're blind. And then they got killed by a monster, and then the party kills the monster. Just like this happens, and then it causes a problem, so they kill it, and the problem is
yeah.
resolved. And on to the next problem.
One of the things I always loved about the movie growing up was that it felt like it didn't really have a real plot, and
Yeah,
I kind of enjoyed that because it was like, I mean, I think what did you describe it as, a series of vignettes? Like that's really accurate.
yeah.
It's
It's a
got,
series of vignettes.
it's like there's a kind of it's I think because of that it's much more surreal, and it was like
Yeah,
for a 7 year old it's a little bit less intellectually challenging than like Return of the Jedi,
yeah.
which is
You
like,
could
you know.
so like for anyone listening who hasn't seen it, there's the beginning scene and the ending scene, and then there's probably 20 scenes in the middle. You could take those 20 scenes in the middle and rearrange them any way you want, and it wouldn't change the movie
That's true.
at all. It wouldn't change the movie at all. It's very, very weird how interchangeable and inconsequential everything that happens is.
Just like life.
Just like life. I challenge you to tell me why that wizard's girlfriend was in a spider web with a crystal spider with a magic hourglass that could make it stop.
If you're saying that you want me to do a prequel comic to
I'm telling you, I'm challenging you. We've both seen Krull many times. I'm tell me. The movie didn't tell me.
I don't have an answer for you.
Do you have any
I
head canon?
no, I always assumed it has something to do with the fact that he broke her heart, and so she kind of became this like,
Hmm.
unrelenting force of evil, because apparently that's what happens when somebody gets dumped. But I don't know. I actually feel like it is a formula of like fairy tale, like dreamlike logic that is not perfected until the movie Legend comes out. Like, maybe
Legend is so
because
good.
Legend is like maybe 8 years later, and it's like, this is what they this is closer to what they wanted. Um, I mean, it's one of those things where like, I loved Krull as a kid, and I really enjoy it as an adult in a kind of corny way. But like
Yeah.
when I watch Legend, it's like my enjoyment is completely unironic. It's like, you know,
It's weird to watch a fantasy movie that has a budget and then feel like there's a higher budget at your like local Renaissance fair. Because like that's I watch Krull and I'm like, I could make these costumes with stuff in my closet. Like this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
whoa. But like they do build sets for parts of it. But yeah.
What would you rather watch, Krull or the '90s Dungeons and Dragons movie starring one of the Wayne's brothers?
Oh, for just for the camp factor and the bad CG, I'd watch the 90s D&D movie.
Yeah.
Just for the comedy of it. For the aesthetics, like which one has better aesthetics? It's Krull, no doubt.
Yeah.
But what's more enjoyable? The 90s D&D movie is so bad it becomes an all-time classic.
You would have to sit through Marlon Wayne's just
Sit through. Excuse me. I think you mean savor. I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke.
What about oh my god, the end of that movie when they tease the sequel where they go on a quest to bring Dwayne's brother back to life?
Yeah, because the audience is hugely invested in the in the return of the most annoying character in that movie.
It's just that movie is just unbelievably bad. The CG
The CG is
also.
incredible.
We've talked about the James Cameron connection, right?
Oh, that he was originally supposed. He was like maybe attached as a director. I think at some
No,
point.
he was going to be the director.
And then what
He
happened?
was a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan,
Mm-hmm.
massive D&D fan. He was like in the before he became James Cameron, he was like a nerdy artist. He was like a matte painter on like fantasy movies. Like he painted the backgrounds in Escape from New York, and
Ah.
like that's how he got his start. That's why he loves special effects. He was a matte painter by trade. So
Mm-hmm.
he was this nerdy artist who loved D&D. And when he found out someone was shopping the rights around to do the D&D movie,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, I want to be the guy. And like this was like after Titanic or like during Titanic. He was big. He had already done Terminator 2. He'd done, True Lies, I think, a bunch of other things. So he sat down, like the producer attached him to do it, who had the rights to do the movie. And then they had a sit down lunch with Hasbro. And the president at the time of Hasbro, I think, said to James Cameron, so what makes you think that, as a director, you're the right person to capture,
Oh,
Dungeons and Dragons?
that's
And
really stupid.
I guess James Cameron just got up and walked out
That's so
because he was
stupid.
like, yeah, insane, the hubris. The hubris of Hasbro is a recurring theme in their company's history. But
The guy just made Terminator 2,
yeah,
and you're
so
like,
then the producer was left with the rights to D&D that he paid all this money for, but he didn't have a director attached. So to save money,
he did it
he
himself.
just shot it himself.
Yeah.
And that's why we got what we got.
And he was like 20 something, right? He was really young.
Yes. And he'd never directed anything. And he was like, well, we lost James Cameron. I guess I'll do it.
I will say, okay, for a guy who's never directed a movie before, it's actually, when you put it in that context, it's not bad. I mean, the movie's
I'll put
bad.
it this way. I'll put it this way. The plot makes more sense than Krull.
Well,
And
yeah.
Krull was made by people that knew how to make a movie. This guy had never made anything, and he at least shot scenes that worked back to back to back to back. But
That's true.
holy shit. Yeah, like what an insane. Can you imagine if we got a James Cameron directed high fantasy movie like 20 years before Game of Thrones?
I mean, it would have changed movies completely. Like
Yes.
you probably would have had a string in the late '90s, early 2000s of like high fantasy films. You would have had You would have had an adaptation of Lord of the Rings that happened at a different time with a different director. You would have had all this
Yeah.
stuff. Well, actually, maybe not because Lord of the Rings was already in production apparently at the same
Already in
time.
production. Yeah.
I mean, there's that funny thing from Red Letter Media where they talk about how, because they're both from New Line Cinema, I think.
Yeah.
And so they talk about like, if the director of D&D saw the dailies of Lord of the Rings like in the same building, and was just like, you ever hear that part?
Very
Where
good.
they're just like, if he's making this shitty movie that he looks and he just sees like little clips from Lord of the Rings, he's like, I would like to hang myself now.
Battle of Helm's Deep happening. The showdown with the Balrogs happening on the monitor next to him.
Yeah, right at the same time that he's filming that scene where he does the ear violation with the little worms. The guy.
The best. They're like figuring out how to do Gollum with like Andy Serkis curled up in a ball doing insane gymnastics. Meanwhile, they're making the 3D beholders in the D&D movie. And you're like, oh no.
Jeremy Irons in that movie
Yeah,
is
Oscar-winning
is
performance.
a revelation.
I don't care if that he didn't get an Oscar. It's an Oscar-winning performance.
Yeah,
It's an Oscar-deserving
yeah.
performance.
Somebody should have given him a hot dog for sure. I assume
Blood
it
will
was
rain from the sky.
blood will rain from the skies,
From the
and he's
skies.
like
Yeah,
shaking. It's incredible,
fucking amazing.
and you can tell the minute this yelled cut, he probably cracked up. Like he knew he was just going for it. You know?
The fucking treasure vault with the lich who's like, "You are looking for the magic." Blah 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 blah. That scene was so dope. It's so stupid and awesome.
Yeah. And also like a thing when I saw that, even when I saw it as a kid, I was like, why are none of the other characters allowed to do anything except this guy Ridley?
Hmm.
Remember the main character, the one who's like the generic kind of
Yeah,
he literally every scene is just him doing stuff, and occasionally some of the other characters do it. So, and it's like, do they realize how badly they're screwing up the whole team dynamic of D&D? Like,
yeah, it's amazing. And at the end, when they're like, "You need to run through this dungeon to prove yourself because it's Dungeons and Dragons," I'm like, "Okay, all right, okay." Which they then do again in Honor Among Thieves, which is wild that they did that plot beat
oh,
at
did
the
they?
very end. Yeah, at the very end of Honor Among Thieves, they were like, "Well, there weren't enough dungeons in this movie, so in the arena at the end, we're going to have a makeshift dungeon come up out of the floor of the arena, and it's going to be full of monsters and chests and items, and they're going to run through it, but it's going to be like a thing that changes in real time, like a living dungeon." It's like, really, we're doing this again?
Wow. But who's the one who goes through it? Is it Chris Pine?
It's the whole team,
Oh, okay. At least it's at
and
least.
there's a rival team, which is that's like one of the only parts of the movie that I really like is that scene, only because there's a rival team of adventurers that have cooler characters that we never get to meet. Like there's a really cool dwarf with like a crazy awesome beard, and he's like an old dwarf. He's like 80, and he's like this grizzled barbarian with this awesome design, and he like dies immediately in that scene. But it's like this other party looks cooler than the party we have as our main characters.
Is that played as a joke, or like are they like? Is it like a Venture Brothers thing where you never see the coolest parts? All you see is the in between, or what?
I think it's essentially like they were mad that Critical Role existed, and they were like, "We're gonna do Critical Role but ourselves," which completely misses the point because Critical Role is the people making it. It's not a thing. It's like lightning in a bottle. You can't redo it. But they took the wrong lessons from Critical Role, which is everybody needs to be funny and everybody needs to roll charisma checks on everything, and we can't have archetypes. Everyone has to be funny all the time, quirky and funny. Everyone is quirky and funny always. You can't have any serious characters, and if they are serious, the seriousness has to be played for comedy. It has to be Drax from Guardians taking everything literally. Everyone's got to tell jokes, or the joke is that they can't tell jokes. And isn't it so funny how funny our characters are? And it's like, no, it just gets so boring and grating. And by the end of it, you're just kind of wishing all of them would die. You're like, oh, please, please open that mimic and please let it kill Chris Pine, please. Like I don't need him to look at the camera and make a smug little Han Solo smile and say, "Well, that just happened." I don't need it. I don't need it again. But yeah, there's another party at that end scene. I think there's like two other parties that are full of really cool looking characters. The only reason I don't like the characters in that movie is you're adapting Forgotten Realms. You're doing D&D, and you have a character. You have a team of what is essentially 5 normal looking human beings. You've got Wizard, who is just a kid, just a normal looking kid who's socially awkward and doesn't know how to talk to girls. Okay. You've got girl character who's just a normal looking girl. She's got some tiefling horns, I think, maybe, but she's just girl. Just looks like a human, and she's socially awkward and doesn't know how to talk to the guy. And then you've got barbarian lady who's socially awkward and doesn't know how to talk to people because she takes everything literally, like Drax, who just looks like a woman. You've got Chris Pine, who is the only one who's not socially awkward, but because no one gets his jokes, he goes full circle to becoming socially awkward.
Naturally.
And he's just handsome man. And then you've got handsomer man, who is just a guy wearing armor. I think they say he's an elf, but he's just a guy wearing armor. And he's so serious that it's socially awkward because he's paladin. And that's your team. It's just 5 normal humans doing normal human stuff because it might cost too much to make like a Gimli or something.
Huge missed opportunity again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Really
know.
is a bummer.
Well, the aversion to risk has become the biggest risk. Like it's like at this point, it's a bigger risk to make more generic crap because it just doesn't. It doesn't. I don't know. Maybe the movie did well, but I can't imagine they're putting many asses in the seats with this anymore. Like because
It did
people.
not do well. I think it might have. Here's the real irony of that movie is it probably would have performed because it's not a terrible movie. I
Mm-hmm.
have gripes. I have gripes with it because I want D&D to be something it's not. But for what it is, an imitation of Critical Role, it was pretty good. And the movie itself isn't hard to watch. It's got some good art direction. It's got some, the script makes sense. It's got themes that you can attach yourself to. It's got stakes. But they decided to release it the same week as the Mario movie,
Mm-hmm.
which again, the hubris of Hasbro is like, the reason it bombed isn't because it was a bad movie. If they released it in January, it would have been great. Would have made all the money in the world. But they didn't do that.
That's a shame.
Yeah,
It's a shame
because
because there's. I mean, I don't know if there's any directors now. I would love to see somebody go in a crazy direction and get like Cary Fukunaga to direct a D&D film, you know? Like
yeah.
I know that'll never happen at this point. But he was originally attached to do it,
Oh, that would have been hilarious.
like his version
I
of.
would have. I would have loved that.
Can you imagine how good he would have? I mean, he's shown some of the concept art for what his version of Pennywise would have looked like.
Yeah.
It's Have you seen it?
No.
It's really interesting. He had a much different vision, and then I think I can't speak too intelligently about what it was, but I imagine based on some of the things they've hinted at that they had a direction they wanted to go in with the casting and everything, and he did not want to do that.
Mm,
And Which is a shame because you could have had a Cary Fukunaga Stephen King movie.
that would have been so dope.
It would have been incredible. I mean, like his. I'm rewatching True Detective season 1 now. I'm doing my annual rewatch of it.
Oh, it's great.
It's so good, and it's like just let. I don't understand. Like, just let him do whatever. Let a director make a movie. You don't have to.
Right.
If he's proven he knows what he's doing, just let him work.
Yeah, just let him do his thing.
I don't know why they do this thing where they try to like talk him off a ledge. I don't understand. I don't know what the
Yeah, I
possible.
don't know. I don't get it. It's like I don't know. The D&D thing is such a bummer because like the concept art for the movie is great. All the monsters look really good. The world building is good. Good villain. Really good setup for a trilogy.
Mm.
If they had done it, it would have been great. But yeah, the characters, the writing on the characters wasn't interesting enough, and they released it against probably the worst possible thing to ever release a movie against. But yeah,
I don't think they
it's also
realized how. Sorry,
oh,
go ahead.
no. You don't think they realize what?
How I don't think they understood. But like Hasbro must have understood that D&D was going to be a big thing, right? They must have known that.
The whole point of them making that movie was because Critical Role made D&D explode in popularity in a way that they never thought was possible, and because of their contract with the open user agreement, they weren't able to reap the money from Critical Role. Critical Role was just printing cash, and Hasbro wasn't getting a cut of it. So they were like, okay, now that D&D is popular because someone else made it popular for us, now that Critical Role has made it interesting to the public again and not like a stigma,
Mm-hmm.
we have to cash in on this while it's hot. So they tried desperately to make a cinematic universe like Marvel, and really kind of attach themselves to the Guardians of the Galaxy formula of like we're going to do a group of outlaws that are quirky and socially awkward and found family and all that stuff, and it could have worked. The movie that they put out, I think, would have made a lot of money if they released it in January, but they decided to go up against Mario, which is also hilarious because it's two game-related properties that bombed in the 90s and 10 IPs duking it out. And
That is
like,
funny.
it didn't do bad. It made like 600 million, but it cost over a billion to do with all the advertising, so
Wow.
it lost money. But like, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean you got to triple the budget to really like when they talk about the budget to make a movie, you don't really get the full budget until you triple it
Yeah,
because I believe right because advertising is essentially.
I might have that backwards. It might have cost 350 and made it might have cost 350
Mm-hmm.
and then double it, so it's like 700, and maybe it only made 300. but it's something like
That
that
sounds
where
right.
it didn't recoup its costs.
Oh man, what a disaster.
But I know it's fun, good stuff. It's a shame because like all these awesome people that love the IP did amazing work on it. Like Wes Burt did a ton of concept art for it, and it all looks incredible. And
Yeah.
like I don't know, had good actors. The writing was, not my favorite, but people like it. People like the quirky Guardian stuff nonstop. I get it.
Do people like it though? I feel like I'm hearing more and more people be like, "Please deliver me from this. Like, I don't want it anymore."
They're starting to not like it now, but when that movie came out, it was still, Guardians 3 hadn't come out yet. It was still hot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was still a thing people liked, but like nobody wants the nobody wants the D&D universe that I want. Nobody wants it.
I
I
think
get it.
I think a lot of people do. I just don't think um I don't think that that's known to the people that are making these things. I think that there's this misconception that people suffer from where they think, "Oh, we'll make it more accessible by making it less unique, like less weird and strange," when in reality that's the whole marketing you should be leaning into, you know? Um I just don't I don't know. Yeah, like I said, the aversion to risk has become a huge risk. It's become like you know, a,
Yeah.
an IP sort of cannibalizing itself.
Well, it's like There Will Be Blood, where it's like if you don't speculate, you never find new oil. You just keep tapping the oil you've already found until there's diminishing returns.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to get a Daniel Plainview in here to go dig up some new shit. You just have to. You just have to. You just have. It's a great movie.
That's my favorite one of his movies.
My
By
God,
Paul
it's a good
Thomas
movie.
Anderson. Because I rewatched Magnolia recently. Have you ever seen Magnolia?
Yeah, I've seen Magnolia.
I didn't really like it the second time I saw it. As an adult, I was like, this movie it lacks subtlety. It's a little too.
Yeah, I like Tom Cruise's unhinged. That's the one I'm thinking of, right?
Yeah, that's Magnolia. Yeah.
I like Tom Cruise's unhinged performance, but as a movie, I don't think it's his strongest.
Yeah, I mean, like the scene that always bothered me, in Magnolia. Many scenes that just feel like too implausible to even be
Yeah.
emotionally invested in. One of them was the scene where the kid who's at the game show for kids,
Yes.
where for like kids Jeopardy or whatever. And he gets nervous and he pees himself, and like the entire staff of the show, all these adults like don't know what to do. And they're like, "Oh my god, he peed himself!" Like
Yeah.
they've been working with kids on this show for like 30 years. They say they've never had this happen. They don't have a
Yeah.
it was so silly, and it was like it just felt like one of those, like there's many scenes like that where I was like, I don't believe.
Takes you out of it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't believe the emotional. It's like you're just creating this just to. It's like it felt emotionally manipulative. Like you want to have the scene where the kid is embarrassed and shamed, but you got to earn it by making
Yeah.
things make sense. Um, yeah, but I do think Tom Cruise's performance is like the standout thing in that movie.
It's fucking unbelievable how unhinged that performance is.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it's Tom Cruise by way of Nicolas Cage, or it's Nicolas Cage by way
yes.
of Tom Cruise, I guess.
It's Tom Cruise by way of Nicolas Cage doing Andrew Tate. It's fucking nuts. It's insane, but
I love
yeah,
it.
it's so stupid and awesome and so memeable, which I don't see in much of it, but it
No,
should be.
yeah. People use the Patrick Bateman meme for like hyper confident, cringy
Yes.
cool guys, but like where's the love for Tom Cruise with a man bun? I mean, come on, guys. Like,
I miss that era of like the 80s were over, the 90s were over. Tom Cruise was already like, king of Scientology, and he was I miss the risky Tom Cruise where he would do a Magnolia or he would do a Tropic Thunder, and
yeah,
he would take on these roles that seemed like something he would never touch. Would like I don't think he would ever do something like that now. But like, yeah, I miss because he's I enjoy occasionally watching a psychopath be a psychopath. And Tom Cruise is a psychopath. And sometimes the stuff he chooses to do is very entertaining. And I can watch it and go, that guy is fucking nuts, but this is very good. It's like the Mel Gibson conundrum.
yeah,
Where I'm like, yeah, he's damn, that's impressive. The guy's nuts, but damn, that's impressive.
yeah. I mean, you saw
But
his interview on Rogan, right?
I saw clips of him talking about the movie he's gonna make, but I didn't watch the episode.
Yeah, he doesn't. I mean, I don't. I don't pretend to know these people, but like he doesn't. Mel Gibson doesn't read as insane for me.
He reads as manic to me. He seems
Yeah, yeah,
he seems like he might be on something, but I don't know what. He's got kind of a shakiness to him, which
Yeah,
I mean, considering the career and the stuff he's had to deal with, I guess that makes sense.
yeah.
But
He comes across as very anxious.
I don't think he ever really recovered from the anti-Semitism stuff and the alcoholism
Yeah,
stuff. I think he went from highest of highs to like he was like king of Hollywood in the 90s to anti-Semite alcoholic. And I don't think he was able to come to terms with those two things, essentially wiping out his entire career overnight. And I think he's become kind of a neurotic mess because he doesn't know how to process being so loved and so hated at the same time.
yeah.
It feels very that the whiplash from that probably is what did it. It's my guess, but I mean, this is just me armchair psychoanalyzing.
No,
So
yeah, I could see that. I mean, he didn't get the same like redemption that someone like Johnny Depp got, after the Amber Heard thing, where people were like, "Oh, that was not true. Okay, fine, you're fine." It's like Mel Gibson's just like he's still
yeah, when it's like I don't know, maybe it might just be the anti-Semitic stuff because like even Robert Downey Jr. got a redemption arc from the drug use and the alcoholism and stuff, but I don't think there's tapes of him saying shit like that people can play ad infinitum, you know?
yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's because people kind of they love a recovered addict. They love that because that's like because
Yes.
it's like a crime that didn't hurt anyone but yourself, and you recovered from hurting yourself. So it's like a very it has a kind of there's like
People love recovery from substance, but when it goes into hating a class of people or
yeah,
a minority of people, I don't think people really ever forgive that.
yeah,
People will forgive drug use because you're like a victim, but when you cross over into the racist stuff or the sexist stuff, it comes off as you're now victim. You're no longer the victim, you're victimizing.
yeah.
And you can bend it around in your head where you go, well, maybe the racism stuff was because of their substance abuse and they're still a victim. But I don't think people give that much charity or grace to people once that line's crossed. They don't seem to, at least.
Yeah, which is a shame because I do think that alcohol can make people say disgusting things.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because like I mean I'm not a heavy drinker, but when I did drink, I remember saying things, not like horrible things, but things that were like, oh, that joke went too far. I should apologize to this person. Like
Right.
I'm gonna tell you a story real quick.
Sure.
This is back from my days as a boxer. Everybody get ready. Everybody sit down on the rug.
Yeah.
Grandpa's sundowning. Here he comes.
Here it
Um,
comes.
when this was after I was on a title card. I was not fighting for any title, but I was on a card with a few other guys from my gym, and
Mm.
which means like you have like a card for anyone who doesn't know is like you have 4 or 5 night fights before the main event, and if you get to be on the card, it means that you're like one of the the fights that happened beforehand. And it was my third fight, which I won by decision, and another guy from my gym who I was pretty good with. He was a nice guy. He was also fighting that night, but he oddly wore his contacts when he was,
Oh,
which was like shocking because he's like, well, I can't wear glasses. It's like, yeah, but you probably shouldn't wear contacts. Someone's going to be punching you in the face. So
yeah. No.
really bizarre decision. Never even knew that you could do that. He gets into the first round and he calls time and he's like, I can't see. And the ref is like, can you continue? And he's like, nah. And it was very embarrassing for him, obviously, that he's been building up to this and his family's there and everything. And he literally just was like, because one of his contacts is in, one was out, which can cause like some visual, whatever.
Mhm.
And at the time during the fight, afterwards he was so ashamed, and I went aside in the locker room, and I still have my bruises from my fight. But I'm like, hey, listen, no one's gonna remember this in like a year. It's fine. Don't worry. Like you fucked up. It was a dumb thing to do, but like at the same time, give a little while, and it'll be a joke that you tell people, and you'll be fine. And I was
Yeah.
like, if I were you, I would take a fight really soon so that you don't let this grow into like a cancerous anxiety lump, and instead you
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
immediately reclaim yourself a little bit. And which I thought was good advice at the time. But then later, we all went to a party. After you get everyone releases the tension, they have a little house party. Everybody drinks. They have some of us had our girlfriends over. It was just like a lot of people from this university, and I get drunker than and I don't like to drink very much, especially then I didn't. And I remember I blacked out. I don't remember what happened, but then the next day, people were like, "Yo, you were so mean to him," and I was like, "What do you mean?" They were like, "You were just,
Oh
you
no.
were making fun of him," and like it was, they were like, "It was hilarious. You were saying funny things, but you could tell it was really hurting him." And I was like, "What did I say?" They were like, "Oh, every time he would like look for his phone, you were like, 'Everybody stop! Steve lost a contact. He's looking for his contacts,'" and just like mocking him about like like if he everything he was doing, I was like, careful, careful. He's gonna get one round in and say he can't see, and like all this stuff,
Oh
which was
no.
so. And it's like that's not my personality. Like genuinely,
No,
like
not at
the
all.
idea of hurting someone's feelings, like is like I like to joke with people, but I like to make people feel okay about themselves. And apparently, I drank to the point where like I don't remember doing this at all, Dan. But I apparently was like picking on him essentially, like. And the next
Oh
day,
no.
and he was a good sport. The next day, he's like, "Hey, listen, you were laying into me pretty hard last night. You were being kind of an asshole." And I was like, "I know, I heard about it. I'm so sorry." And he was like, "No, it's fine, whatever. It's just like, And but I could tell that he was trying to like show, because men, there's a pressure to show that you're okay with it. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
because if you're, it's like you don't want to be weak or something like
Show
that.
no weakness. Yep.
Yeah, which is
Turn it into a cancerous ball of resent in your stomach until it
which
kills you.
which I a year later, I messaged him and I was like, if you're still pissed about that night, you can tell me. And he was like, I don't really think about it that much anymore. But he's like, at the time, that really hurt my feelings. and I,
Mm.
and that was the last time I ever let myself
He
drink that
did
night.
he Don Drapered you.
Yeah.
I don't even think about you. He did it.
Yeah. Where he's
Oh
like,
man.
I feel sorry for you, Draper. He's like, I don't think about you at all.
I don't think about you at all. Yeah, that's wow, that's great.
But you know what though? He never ever, this is to his credit as a guy, he never ever did any passive aggressive shit years later to like let me know that, like, when I apologized, he fully accepted it. And I told him like,
Mm,
I just never want to drink like that again because I don't even remember saying that stuff. It feels like it was just
yeah,
someone else. But yeah.
yeah, I get that.
And he
That's
was a good man about it. He was like, "Oh, listen, it was a joke. I get it. It did hurt my feelings, but it's over, But yada.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I can imagine what happened with Mel Gibson leading him to a place where he's living that kind of anxiety every day for 20 years, you know?
Yeah.
And what does that do to you? Like, yeah, he's still at fault for saying the stuff, but like, yikes. Like, of course, he's going to have anxiety issues.
What does that do to you? Yeah. Yeah. He does come
That's
across as a
insane.
little anxious. He didn't come across as like nuts. He came across as someone who was like, yeah, like nervous. Like, when he speaks very
Yeah.
quickly and very quietly, like he's very like, whispery kind of.
Yeah. It came off almost like, have you ever been in the room with somebody and you're like, they're on like uppers?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this person probably does meth or something like that, where it's like, oh, it's jittery and a little paranoid, and they don't really know how to regulate their voice, and there's a lot of tics going on in their face, and you're like, okay, this is they're going through something, or they're on something to deal with something like this. There's something going on.
Do you think
But
he did it to wean himself off of the drinking, that he started a pill thing, or like a?
I think I think he's probably self-medicating in a bunch of different ways. It could be a legit medication he got, but I think probably going out on a massive, because even when he's like accepting awards for stuff, I've noticed there's a few of those ticks. Like you could see it like when Ricky Gervais would roast him a few years ago when he was doing the Oscar stuff. Like there's something I just don't think he's ever going to come back from the humiliation of that time period for him. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to, because that was like he went from like highest high to lowest low,
Yeah. But now
which
he's,
is
he has a career now. It's just like, sadly, he has to appeal to a very specific demographic to maintain that career. It's like,
I know everybody wanted him to be Cable before they cast Josh Brolin, and I thought that would have been kind of funny.
would have been great casting.
Would have been good casting, yeah.
He keeps like almost getting things, but it's like you feel like there's like a machine that just like is like, no.
Well,
he
yeah, I think it's quite literally he's a brand risk for a lot of people because of the stuff he said.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the Kanye thing. It's like once you cross a certain number of lines, you don't really get to come back. Like no one's going to let you come back because you're too risky. It seems like you're co-signing the stuff that they've said and done if you
Yeah.
attach yourself to them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh man. Yeah,
On
he's.
that cheery note,
What'd you say?
I said on that cheery note.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I don't. He's fine. He's gonna do fine. He's a very rich
Yeah,
man.
I
He's.
will say I did laugh out loud at the casualness of him leaning over to somebody. I can't remember. I saw a clip of this on I think like an Instagram reel. He was in a meeting with someone and he leaned over with his phone and he said, "Look, my house is burning down." And he was just like smiling, looking at his phone at the wildfires. I'm like, the casualness of delivering that line is insane.
Yeah.
That's just like, hey, look, my house is burning down. Like, wow.
It's. Do you think that's just from being so incredibly wealthy? Do you think it's like a
Probably,
thing?
probably, yeah. I think it's also probably just like, I don't know. There's certain, if you're comfortable enough in life and certain horrible things happen, you're able to have a reaction where you can kind of laugh at the tragedy of it. Like if all he had was the house and there were no other possessions, it would, I don't think it would be able to go full circle into comedy, but he's gonna be fine. He's gonna be totally fine. So I think it's, the ridiculousness of it of like, hey, look, everything I've ever purchased is gone in an instant. It's like, okay, like, what else are you gonna do but laugh at that point, considering you still have like $1 billion?
Yeah. Well, he probably has more than one home. I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
100%.
I don't think he's too
I
worried.
guess also I guess the housing market in Los Angeles is totally fucked now. I didn't even think of this. All the people all the actors and studio people that lost homes in the fire are now renting apartments because they have to stay local for work, and it's making the prices of the apartments go sky high because now they can afford to outbuy other people, which
That's
is a crazy downstream effect that I never would have even considered.
it's
But
just more
yeah,
gentrification.
now a $5,000 apartment can go for like 30 grand because like you're renting it to some actor.
Dude,
But
that's that's so sad. Imagine you're like,
it's
yeah, that's
old.
damn.
Yeah. But I found the Luke Skywalker line. I have to go in a moment, unfortunately, but I did find the Luke Skywalker line.
Tell me what it is, please.
I'll do my best, Mark Hamill. Hold on.
Oh, I can't wait for this. I hope everybody's stretched in the comments.
But we can't turn back. Fear is the greatest defense. I doubt if the actual security there is any greater than it was on Aquilai or Sullust, and what was there was most likely directed towards a large-scale assault.
You know what? I see no problem with that dialogue. I think that's crisp. That's clear. In fact, I'm pretty sure that was written by Tony Kushner.
But we can't turn back. Fear is their greatest defense. I doubt if the actual security there is any greater than it was on Aquilai or Sullust, and what was there is most likely directed towards a large-scale assault. You know, and I guess Mark Hamill was like, humans don't talk like this. And yeah,
Oh my god. Yeah, that is
oh
quite bad.
my God,
That's wow. That's interesting though that
great.
if no one had stopped him. It's also interesting that he actually listened to Mark Hamill because I feel like George Lucas doesn't always take notes about that stuff.
True.
Like
I also like what he said Harrison Ford said when he said the complaint. I guess Harrison Ford leaned over. Well, I guess Mark Hamill was like, people don't talk like this. I can't do this dialogue. And I guess Harrison Ford said, kid, this isn't that kind of movie. Just very funny in retrospect.
yeah, he knew exactly what movie he was in.
Uh,
Oh man. All right. Well, listen, I know you got to go. I'm gonna go too. I got to get back to responding to this caterer, or possibly
all right.
I don't know what's gonna happen. But thank you so much for making the time, man. This was fun.
Yeah, we'll do it again soon. And to bookend it, don't shit yourself. You're good, man. You're good. All this will be well. This too shall pass. All will be well.
It's funny how Dan says "Don't shit yourself" as if I haven't been shitting myself this entire time.
Oh my God. It's been fun. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, Ryan. We'll
Later,
do this
guys.
again.
Bye, Dan.
Bye. Let me find where are you in my list of things to open and close. Where could you be? Oh, there you are. All right. Love you, buddy.
Love you too, man. All right, chat. Yeah, gross girl. Let's do a stream when I get back. Uh, because Saturday I am leaving for Italy, guys. I'm going on my honeymoon. We're doing it before the wedding because it just worked out better that way in terms of the prices of tickets and stuff. Um, and I'm hoping I can get maybe one more stream like tomorrow or Friday if possible. But if not, this might be my last one before I leave for like 10 days for Italy. And I want to let you guys know that I love all of you. You're the best. I appreciate you. Um, I hope you guys take care of yourselves and each other. And yeah, God bless. Um, DM me in the Discord, some of you guys, if I missed some of your comments, okay? I got to get back to, I've been dealing with all this wedding planning and it's like slowly melting my brain. But if you'd like to send a message to the melted puddle that was once my brain, DM me on Discord. Anybody watching who's a fan of Dan Warren and found your way to my channel, consider checking out my Patreon where I post my comic pages and all of my art, and gives you access to the Discord, you know, my bank account, my guest room, my cat, you know, just like surface level stuff. All right, guys. Thank you. Oh, I see all the happy honeymoons in the chat. God bless you. I love you. You guys are the best.